2. Hello, welcome to Spotlight, the official podcast of GRAPPL. I'm Benno.
And I'm JP.
I'm JP. Fresh month. It's October. Plenty going on. We are live to our patrons. We're also live now to our YouTube members. You may be watching this on the video replay on YouTube on Wednesday afternoon. But yeah, sorry, you've missed out. You could have watched live last night, live on the YouTube. Go to youtube.com/@grapple if you're an audio listener. You can tune in live via there. We're giving people options, JP, on top of Patreon. You know, we do so much audio. We've added the video elements, and yeah, plenty of ways to get involved now. So yeah, hello to any new YouTube subscribers that are out there.
Yeah, hello to everyone, and yeah, obviously had the launch the member section within YouTube as well. But yeah, for October we have absolutely tons going on for that at the moment. We've got like
spooky month.
It is.
I've been bullied into it by Matt, in my opinion. I think Halloween is for children, but you know we'll go along with the theme now. There's enough wrestling and rated Halloween content to kind of keep us going. I think it has to be done, and you know what? I'm partial to it. You know, it's a nice like time of year. You know, I don't mind like some of the snacks and stuff that you get out there. You know, there's some good. I'm a pumpkin spice latte type of guy, JP.
You love a pumpkin spice latte, don't you? You've always enjoyed one of those.
Which is just milkshakes for adults. So you know, we're doing Halloween for adults this month on the GRAPPL Patreon. That's how it's going to work. As video viewers get to see JP in front of a different kind of house of horror. Listeners to the pre-show will understand that reference.
Exactly. I'm not going to mention it. Just see if anybody picks up on it, and I'll be very intrigued and let us know if that is the case. But yeah, no, we've got a lively schedule up for October as well. We've got the upper mid card of horrors within the film club. That's MOTY curating it as well. So, like, kind of who is that upper mid card horror star? We were talking about it a bit in the pre-show where MOTY was beforehand. We're going to be doing spooky moments with King of the Mountain Robert Brockie. We're doing a flashback. There's going to be a poll because obviously we had Dealer's Choice last month, and that was like very much us curating it. This month, we're letting people take charge in terms of the poll. We've got a Halloween Havoc patrons poll. We decided that's pretty much going to be most WCW Halloween Havocs by not the NXT ones, because I don't want to watch that from like 2 years ago potentially. I don't want that being dropped into the mix. And then we're going to be doing Observe This, which is going to be basically a redux of the time frames around where we had our Dealer's Choice. So do you want to know which one's winning it at the moment?
Oh, go on. So yeah, so the idea is we did Dealer's Choice month last month,
yes.
which went very well. Very much enjoyed that. I think everybody had some good picks there. We closed out the month with Garrett's Dealer's Choice pick state, which was good. 12 under 5, which was 12 matches under 5 minutes, which was a great palate cleanser, as you called it, JP, to kind of close things off last month. But yeah, we decided what we do is to kick off October and to put the power back in the people's hands. We do a few different polls. So yeah, the Observe This is we're going to go back to one of those news weeks. So what are the options are that we can go back to? Mine was Shawn losing his smile. Your one's around the time of Frontiers of Honor. We picked out one for Matty around the time of the Deadly Game tournament and a Goldberg and Lesnar themed one for Gareth. But which of those time periods would you like us to return to? I know what I'll vote for, but leaving it out there. How's the polling going, JP?
Well, at the moment, it's a lot closer than what I thought it'd be. Leading currently, and the poll ends tomorrow. I'm going to be announcing it on the news dump. It is the 24th of February, 1997, teased end of Shawn Michaels' career, with a surprise IC title switch thrown in there as well. But that's winning, so that's going to be absolutely that one at the minute. 37% on 32. We've got the 23rd of November 98. Rock becomes corporate champion. WWF Survivor Series review. The one for Frontiers of Honor, which was mid-May, 12th of May. Death of Miss Elizabeth, which clearly has nothing to do with Frontiers of Honor event, not related to it at all. And New Japan Ultimate Crush, which I don't have a clue what that is. Just another wacky sort of mid-2000 New Japan show where probably some MMA blokes win. I'm going to have a guess. And on 7%, it's Goldberg agrees to all matches, and that's from November 2016. So, yeah.
Okay.
That's the voting at the moment, but it can all change. So if you want to get on board with that, patreon.com/grapple.
There you go. And as well as that, as patreon.com/grapple, you can join us over on the YouTube as well. Become a member, join us there and watch the stuff as well, which will also be the home this month of the Return of Time, which I know you guys are excited to do. We announced when you're what period of time this one is. I think it's a 2000s one, is it? I don't want to give too much away, or are we saying it outright? I think we are. What is it?
I think we can say up on here at the moment. I'm just gonna get it up on here. I'm not going to go into the kind of detail of what actually is going to be there, but it's September 2007. Okay. So we're all going to be able to remember a lot of this. I feel like I don't want to announce sort of necessarily too much, but I have no idea. Beautiful Girls by Sean Kingston. Was that a good tune as well?
I don't remember
Vicky, who's nodding her head in agreement. That is, hey there, Delilah by the Plain White Tees, and Stronger by Kanye West.
Okay, I remember that. At some point, I will. At some point, I definitely wanted. I'd love to be a guest on time if it ever ever develops. You know, if there was ever an opportunity there. And I don't want to ruin it. I think the show is best with you four. But if there's ever a time you need a guest, I'm sure I'll jump on. But I don't know if 2007 would be the one for me, because 2000, as good a year as that is for like content and stuff like that you can talk about, I'd find it hard to get too nostalgic about it, because I feel like it just happened to me, and I know it didn't, and I know it's like almost 2 decades ago. It's a bit like what we were talking about on the pre-show, Joe versus Kobashi being 18 years ago, 16 years ago, that 2007. But trying to think what I would have been doing in September 2007. I was in GPW. I've been having wrestling matches, so I presume the entire show is just going to be just reviewing whatever I did in September that year. I don't think I had a match that month. Oh well, that's a shame. But
that Survivor Series match, definitely, definitely that one. But yeah, September 2000.
What was young JP doing in 2007? What was the
Max was born. I'm now going to be looking at universities with him in a couple of weeks' time. That's the terrifying prospect of this. Is those lads were young. I'm having pints with one of them as people are kicking off about VAR decisions during Liverpool versus Spurs, as we've spoken about on the pre-show as well. So it's going to be like a wild. It's going to be one of these wild things of like, was this going on at that point in time? So yeah, looking forward to a trip down memory lane, seeing what also as well normally what was on in the soaps as well. That's normally a great laugh, but I don't think we haven't got Brookside at that point in time, have we? That had gone.
Yeah, I suppose that. I can't at that point. What would it have been? It was the Channel 5 one. Hollywood
Family Affairs.
Family Affairs. There you go.
Yeah. I think that was I might have watched an episode once, but that'd have been a slog.
I look forward to hearing it, and what was going on in the charts, what was going on in sport, what was going on in film, get it all covered, as well as what was going on TV. So will be free on the YouTube this month. But again, plenty, as you can for video viewers, you can see up on the screen. Spotlight every week, weekend show on Fridays, film club, flashback, spooky moments with King of the Mountain Robert Brocky coming up as well, and obviously the observe this dealer's choice redux, as you mentioned there. So all going on over here. But on that note, JP, we should probably get right to it, as it is all going on in the wrestling world this week, as we are in week one of possibly like a 10-week run now or something like that, of just pay-per-view. It was nice having a couple of weeks break, to be honest. Like, a week went by without an AEW pay-per-view on it. So, it was nice to, actually do other things. But we're back. Payback's next week. Bound for Glory, I think, is the week after that. At some point, there's a Saudi show. There's another AEW pay-per-view coming. New Japan's got stuff going. And Copper Box is coming up as well. If you thought the summer was busy, the winter's about to slap us over the face, I think. And who knows what Tony Khan might add. There'll probably a winter is coming pay-per-view. AEW in your house is probably coming at some point. It's all on.
I'd watch AEW in your house. That'd be good fun as well. But yeah, I was just thinking about the sheer amount of content, especially if this weekend you watched Dynamite, Rampage, Collision, and then like a 5-hour pay-per-view, combined with a 0 hour. It's fucking insane, this amount of content. And NXT, which in fairness I managed to watch by Sunday morning. I don't know how I managed to fit.
Yeah, and I squeezed that in on Sunday as well, and Collision, which at the end of Collision, I was like, oh, it was a good show. Probably didn't need to see it, and not many people did, based on the viewership that we're gonna get into in a little bit. But yeah, we should talk WrestleDream. Obviously, I think we know what we've been asking the question for weeks. JP, what's a WrestleDream? I think we know the answer now. a very long wrestling show, a very good wrestling show. I've got plenty of positive to say about it. There's some big stories, big debuts, big matches. I stayed up live for it, watched the entire thing. I think Tony Khan's presser was still going on at like 6, 7 in the morning, something daft like that UK time. That's the other reason I'm recording on Tuesday, wants to give you a chance to actually watch it last night, JP, with the hours worth of stuff. It was one of them. The pre-show kicked off at, I think it was 11:30, and they did like that thing where you get the half an hour of them talking, and then you get the hour of matches, and then the pay-per-view starts. And I just kept looking at what's going fucking hell. Like, we still got more to go here, and I would say some of the matches maybe suffer for that, but overwhelmingly, feel like I got my money's worth. It was a good show from AEW.
Oh yeah, you'd have to say so. I mean, the length notwithstanding, did it deliver good wrestling matches on the show? You go, yeah, that's 3 shows in a row where you have some of the greatest wrestlers in the world doing professional wrestling, and you're going to kind of find that they are going to be really good. I think the thing about this one is this one had the most kind of what it felt like the most logic to it, necessarily in the build up. It felt like it was slightly more rewarding than perhaps some of the others, than being these kind of like very good, pleasant shows, but I'd not enjoyed the build to them at all. I enjoyed the build generally in the main for this. So it meant I was kind of enthused for some of the matches, but I was relieved. I wouldn't have been able to watch this live. Like you say, I put on the pre-show. I'd seen like 5 minutes of that, and I was like, they're doing like 4 matches as well. I'm like, oh, fuck this. It's all going to have to wait. So I was quite relieved when he said like about recording this on Tuesday. But yeah, managed to catch up. It's just you can't say that you don't get enough wrestling on an AEW show in total. You really can't argue that fact.
Not just AEW, is it? WWE as well. So John and Wade talking about that last week and trying to cover this entire week. Dylan saying, "Hey, I get up at 5 a.m. You can see daylight." Simon getting out of bed, and the press conferences running on YouTube. This is just the world we live in now. We do nothing. We watch. It's winter. It's fucking cold. What else is to do other than sit in and watch the wrestling? But yeah, like I say, I thought it was a good show overall. We can go through like the I suppose we're going to try a different route through looking at like this pay-per-view, just with the sheer amount of matches that are to get through here. Maybe we'll start with the bigger stuff, and then we'll work our way through. We will still cover everything, fear not, as we do. But there's probably only one place to start with this collision. This pay-per-view, JP, this WrestleDream pay-per-view, in the big debut of one of our favorite wrestlers to say, Matty's, who was based on the pre-show, waiting with bated breath for us to talk. The bigger rival, Tony Khan, was giving him all the hugs and presenting him like many other bigger AEW debuts we've seen over time as don't call him Edge, the rated R superstar, which is fucking hilarious that WWE have somehow let that trademark lapse in 2020. I think it was the last time they trademarked that. So we're going full TNA. They didn't go full TNA with like, he wasn't didn't call him Sexton Hardcastle, or can't remember what was his WCW name. It was like Damien something, like Damien Sex or something like that was his name, something awful like that when he was doing like WCW Pro and like Saturday Night and stuff. But yeah, Sexton Hardcastle was left behind, and the rated R superstar Adam Copeland, or maybe we just do as a couple of people said, just call him Cope, all capital letters. Maybe that could be it.
He has trademarked it.
Is that where that story's come from?
One of those, Cope. And legend with Edge in there. That worries me. Those things, that kind of thinking at this stage scares me.
That was his name, Damien Striker. That's what he used to be called. It's funny because I remember, I don't always remember his big debut, and it was at Over the Edge, wasn't it? Obviously the pay-per-view we don't sort too much about, but like I remember all the build up to it, and just being me as like we talked a lot about 12-year-old me loving Shawn Michaels in 1996. This would have been a couple of years later, and I was a massive Sting fan at the time. Obviously, everyone was in 97 into 98, and like I was like, oh, this new wrestler's so cool. He's like this brooding character with his big trench coat, and it was like, oh yeah, I think I like him so much because it's like they're just doing Sting, aren't they? But they're calling him Edge, named after the pay-per-view Over the Edge, and somehow that stuck. Somehow that became his name forever, and we got a very, very long career out of it. Obviously, with a big break in the middle as well. But there was a slim period there. a fan of Edge, but obviously it was I don't know, one of those not very well kept secrets, JP. In coming in, I think we knew it when we did the weekend show preview. We've braced ourselves for it. He's saying all the right things, as far as the the press and stuff. He's done the whole, all came out. It felt like I was on the indies again. It felt like, everything was new and it's a new challenge. And he's listing all these wrestlers he wants to work. Couple of interesting ones in there. Mentioned Samoa Joe as somebody he wants to work. Mentioned having never actually crossed paths with Jon Moxley, which in my head makes no sense. But of course, he would have been out, and then obviously came back after Moxley had already signed to AEW. So he's treating it like the big deal it is. And there we go. We got our ready-made replacement for CM Punk, have we not, JP? Are we ready to go? He's going to fill that void. He's going to be the new Phil. We're going to new beam period coming for AEW as Edge comes in. Before we get into how they executed it, like, what's your overall thoughts on Edge coming into AEW now that it's real, now that it's really happened?
I think I've slightly more conflicted thoughts. There's always the novelty of people who always feel like they're completely part of the WWE system being somewhere else, and it's how they're going to present themselves, how seriously are they going to take it. And we'd already seen that with Christian. We did a show about it, like kind of him in TNA, so we kind of knew what he was like outside of that system. And I think we weren't excited about him coming in, but with Edge, we'd had this frankly quite disappointing run of him coming back to WWE, and I was slightly more like ambivalent, I suppose. I didn't really, I was disappointed by it, but I didn't. I suppose at the same time not have overwhelming expectations. He was just like kind of the guy who was never the big top star. When he was there was always issues effectively with, it was always going to be seen or on top, and he was like a good foil for like a period of time. Is how I'd end up viewing him. I'm not convinced that he's going to be necessarily a difference maker per se. I think what he adds is just a well-known presence, and he's in a different environment, and there's a lot of novelty to him coming back in, and the crowd pop, and the fact he's got his music, which is the most important part of his act. I refuse to say the name of the song because it's like fucking ridiculous, but like effectively that's so much part of it as well. And his name, it's not like he's got a daft name, he's got a perfectly good name. And I never thought I'd get used to Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, for God's sakes, when they left for WCW, and I was perfectly fine with that. So I think it's just like, bring him in as Adam Copeland. This should be a short-term run. I'm not looking forward to necessarily the matches. They'll have some fucking wacky brawls and the rest of it. And maybe at best, is it going to be a pleasant surprise in the way that Christian Cage's run is? I'm fucking loving that. And I didn't think I'd be in that position as well. That's probably why I'm a bit more open-minded to this, because that has to be considered to be like a big success.
I mean, Christian absolutely, turned, I was going to say some of us round, turned me around. I was very anti-Christian, especially when he first came in, and he was like just a dry baby face working with Kenny Omega, and he's got like this, I know there's people who, Christian means a lot to as an underpushed, undersized kind of big card in WWE, with, right through into the, what's this, Metal English was what Peter Weller's getting up to on the set of RoboCop.
Listen to the pre-show for that.
Listen to the pre-show to get that reference. And I've said the name there, that's in there. It won't be the name of the show. But like, I've absolutely changed my mind on Christian, and it's like, it's through, the really, as MJF said in an interview this week, him having almost the run of his life, at least as a character for me. And there were definitely points in Christian's career I probably liked them more than I let on when he came into to AEW. But I was strongly negative on him, and just kind of this, trodden path of bringing in a wrestler like that. And I was proven wrong. Will I be proven wrong with Adam Copeland? Like, I heard Tom Martin say this on the Torch. I hope so. Like, I'm not excited for it. I wasn't as, I'm not the one in my household who was had the strongest negative reaction to it when he came out. Twitter.com/Stephanie M. Chase to see some takes on that. She was not a fan of him coming out, because it does, say something. It's like, it's the new era, isn't it, of AEW? And the new era turns out to be the old era because we're bringing in, you know, yet another old man who's had his WWE run and fancies his little his jolly over in AEW. It's whether you can turn that into a positive. I can't say I particularly want to see it. As you've said, the last couple of years of WWE stuff has been rough. You know, I made the joke he aged about 10 years during that run as well. He looked so fresh faced in retirement, and then he's back in WWE for like 6 months, and it felt like it aged them about 10 years. And you know, the positive a lot of people will say in a circumstance like this is when somebody like that comes to an AEW, you know, they're not going to have the WWE machine in the way, and they're going to be able to implement their ideas in their purest form. And it's like, I don't know. I mean, I know they went back and forth on whose fault, like, you know, the early Judgment Day was, and you know, stuff like that. But a lot of it felt like Adam Copeland's ideas. A lot of like, you know, and you know, the early stuff with Randy Orton and the best match ever. I'm sure that was Vince Brandon, but was it Vince making him sit there on a stool and cut the world's most boring programs with this overly serious kind of like, you know, I'm an actor edge to all, you know, irony, the Edge promos. I hated all of it, and I suppose I was never gonna love it, but he definitely was. He was someone who, you know, SmackDown 6 era, I liked Edge. Early on when he came in, I liked Edge. I wasn't there with Matty for the Rated R, you know, era. I'm sure he's going to make us do a Randy Orton / Edge mixtape at some point. We'll see if my mind gets turned, but he always was that to me, JP. Absolutely. He was like a B-level main eventer. You know, he was not Cena. I think that actually in a lot of ways made a lot of like adult fans, I think, gravitate towards him and, you know, really like him during that period because he was an alternate. So I can see that. He's just never been for me. And you put the list of possibilities in front of me at AEW, and it's like, it's cool. He's saying names like Samoa Joe and Kenny Omega and stuff like that. But I don't know. It just doesn't feel like one I want to see. And it does beg the question of kind of what Steph's been saying on the tweets. And you know, she'll have said on a podcast today, like, is this, you know, is this the jump in the shark for AEW bringing in, like, you know, have we become TNA at this point? You know, that's always the worry early on in AEW. You don't want to be that promotion that just brings in all the old guys. And yes, there's value to Adam Copeland. Yes, he's coming off a WWE run where he's been on TV and he's, you know, a name that people are going to know. But like, does it maybe slightly change the dynamic of what AEW was going to be? You know, is it more, is it the home for the older wrestlers? You know, is that we're just going to start seeing that now, more WWE guys coming over to AEW for the payday? Because he can talk all he wants about how, you know, he wanted the new challenge of AEW, but I think the reports are saying basically WWE didn't meet his financials, so he came to AEW, and that's the reason he didn't come to AEW at the start as well. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not positive on it, JP. I don't see it, but as Tom Martin said, I would love to be wrong on it.
Yeah, that's it. And I think you've kind of encapsulated it there. I mean, I have to say, in terms of the way he was presented, I liked it. It was, well, actually, I say that. I'm not as mad on the video that I know a lot of people are a lot more excited about that. I saw the video and I was like, really? Like, I don't know, it just looked like kind of sub grindhouse style stuff. And it's just like, well, I'm about to tack you in the ring, and then I'm just going to watch telly for a few seconds while holding said chair.
I mean, it was, in an era, if this is the new AEW era, and it's felt like that more and more, that there's more WWE adjacent people with power in AEW.
Yeah.
But a lot of I mean, it felt very WWE. I actually don't know what Matty thought of the debut. He probably loved it, but I mean, I hated it. I thought it stunk. Like, I just like it was a cool moment, but I mean, it doesn't really stand up to scrutiny, does it? Because like Sting's about to die in ring, like he's about to get his head caved in, and you know, Adam Copeland has at some point, as he said in the presser, gone off with Darby Allin to you know, to record this this vignette, and you know, it has to be aired, waiting for him to come out, and then once it's aired, his music has to play, and then once his music plays, you have to do it. Was it Jeff Hardy, the famous one a few years ago, do all this pose and stuff, and have a little run around on the stage, and understandably soak in the moment, and then eventually come out, and then eventually, you know, do a whole like Russo type, oh, am I gonna join the baddies? No, I'm not. I'm actually gonna hit them thing. Like it was very. It didn't encourage. If this was like, I know we don't know if this is how he wanted to debut, but that didn't encourage me either. I don't know, and it's. it's the whole presentation to me. Like to me, he just looks like a a middle-aged dad who's trying to go back to his old rocker roots from his teenage years. Like I don't find anything like cool or appealing about how he presented himself either. The only positive I could say about it is the real life bloke seems like a nice guy, and the interview he did with Tony Khan afterwards was the most positive can be. But I didn't feel like that entire segment really made me think this is a guy who's thinking when it comes to wrestling is going to align with mine.
And I think, do you know what? I mean, I don't know. The part of the problem is it's the storyline he's getting involved in necessarily as well, where there's already a lot of moving parts into the mix. It's like in the moment, I love the pop and the idea of him being there. And then I thought about it and I was like, well, actually, no, this is kind of the reasons why I'm not necessarily mad on it, even though I'm very much open to ideas about like how good this could be. If there's things where he's going to be working this out with Christian, who has played a blinder in terms of like kind of developing his character. It's like if that's the people he's associating with and they kind of have an element of free reign and the daft ideas get shot down because he's got his best mate as this kind of filter there to go, no, this is the best way we can play off each other here. With the aim, because you can't argue as well with like the Christian stuff. It's elevated people. It's not like been in that Jericho sense where, I think it's because his character is so fucking good. I mean, he's overtaken Jungle Boy, but you can argue like with Darby Allin as well. Like it was it has worked. I mean, whether or not it should have been main eventing the pay-per-views, it was only main eventing because of this moment. The moment it was put into this position as a match, you knew that this moment was going to happen at the end of it. But yeah, I think with this, like those kind of presentational things, they're very WWE, but a lot of the producers now are WWE. And then you're getting ex-WWE writers in Jimmy Jacobs and stuff like that. And that's the whole problem that TNA kind of, I'm comparing it to TNA, I suppose. What TNA always mistake is, or the big mistake was always, we need to be like them rather than we need to be different. And bringing in Edge in this way, when you've got a lot of kind of an old guys, that's like you said earlier on, it's very, very TNA. And that doesn't give you good thoughts about like storyline progress for this. But again,
and I know people are going to push back on me specifically because they'll be like, well, you were happy when CM Punk came in. That was an old ex-WWE guy, I think CM Punk is different because he was out for so long and because I've seen the argument made, JP, but he was, he encapsulates that spirit, or he did, of what AEW was, the counterculture rebel brand.
Yeah.
And obviously, it didn't go that way, unfortunately. And, he deserves plenty of criticism for that. I think Bryan Danielson's another one. Like, he fits in perfectly because, again, the style of wrestling he wants to do, as we saw on this pay-per-view, fits AEW, and he fits in with the kind of the ethos of AEW. Even Mox, like that rebellious spirit of the guy being willing to be the first to hold his hand up and leave WWE and come to AEW. There's something to that as well. Edge, on the other hand, just feels, I don't know, it's very WWE. He's a top guy. Why? Because WWE have told us he is all over this time, and I don't really actually believe he is. He's a complete 100% WWE product, and that's the difference, I think, with him. That's where I think there is a lot of stank on him, and I think he hasn't helped that the last 2 years with his creative, with his a lot of his matches, with a lot of the stuff that he did in WWE over the last couple of years. So that doesn't encourage me either. So that's kind of where I am. I just don't see Edge as that level of starter to overcome it as well. But maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe he'll be on Collision next week and the rating will double. Maybe he'll be on Dynamite and the segments will do great, and it'll be like that era when him and Lita were having live sex celebrations at Raw. Like, better that than if it's like when he did come back to WWE and he tanked the NXT rating the week he was on it. He tanked the SmackDown, and I think he tanked the Raw in like quick succession. Like, there's a big question there of what level of draw he actually is. Is he actually a draw top guy who's going to be a difference maker for AEW? Is he going to sell a lot of merch like a Punk did or like a Bryan and Mox do? Or is he going to be somebody who's just like, well, he's top guy because he was always pushed that way in WWE, and we found out that he's not. He's going to have to put his working boots on, absolutely.
And that's the thing. Those guys you mentioned earlier on, you mentioned about like Moxley, for example, and like all of their other kind of people have brought in. Punk, there was in ring. We've not seen that with Edge in that run. A lot of that in ring stuff was like, he feels very, very kind of bland as a wrestler, and obviously matches were so overwrought, and you thought if he's got involvement in this, like I say, they're the things that kind of worry you. You're hoping on a lot. There's a lot of hope for this, and I just think it's in the sense of you don't really know which direction it's going to end up going in, simply because you're hoping that people like, what are his wrestling instincts like? What has he been fighting with people about necessarily? It's the sink or swim moment. Is he a big star? Well, we're going to kind of see it, aren't we? We're going to see what kind of level of star he is, because that used to be the thing with TNA. We saw the kind of level of star that a lot of people really were. Like, say, a Booker T, where you just take them outside of that environment. They don't mean fuck all.
And the TNA comparison, as you and rightly said before, you know, it depends on what you do with them. And, you know, TNA did bad with some guys and did, you know, Christian, it was probably an example of someone they did relatively well with until he didn't. As Steph says here, it kind of, the counter is, of course, it's the Paul Heyman point, isn't it? Remember when he wanted to take over SmackDown, he was like, I'll have one old guy. Just tell me, TNA, sorry. He was like, give me one old guy. And Dixie Carter wouldn't commit to only letting him have one old guy. You know, you now add edge to kind of that list of guys that AEW have kind of already taken. It's weird. I feel like if he'd come in at the start of AEW, like in that Jericho role, it would have made a bit different. It was fresh. It would have been completely fresh. He'd been out for so long, and you know, he'd joined that challenger brand from the start. Instead, like I say, he's had this, you know, critically panned WWE run, I think, at least from my point of view, and then is now, after having his WWE run, trying to have his cake and eat it too, and come over to AEW. He certainly thinks he can help. We'll see. You know, obviously there'll be matches with FTR. You can guarantee that based on the video footage you saw. There'll be stuff with Christian, and like you say, Christian has turned me around plenty, so maybe I should have a bit more faith there. And yeah, there are people like MOTY, like our friend Davey Portman, who's a big fan of Edge, and is definitely more. He's been giving me grief on Twitter this week. Is definitely more positive on Edge. There's probably listeners and viewers out there who, you know, have belief that he can turn it round. You know, not everyone agrees with us either, but like his entire WWE run was a bust. There's definitely stuff in there that I think people did end up enjoying, despite the stank of the best match ever and stuff like that. But yeah, you know, maybe I'll just need to look at it like, you know, Ewan says here in the chat he was going to join AEW in 2020. I think it turned into a money thing, and WWE made a better offer. AEW was in a very different position at that point. There was definitely a point where I used to, you know, my most positive memory of Edge and Christian, I always mention it, their podcast. I fucking love that podcast, as the Garrett. And they were always raving about AEW in those early days, or at least even when they were critical, they felt that they were more Stevie Richards than they were Bully Ray. You know what I mean? They were like, you know, oh, these young guys, maybe they're doing a bit too much, but you know, this is what we like about it, type of thing. And they were very, like, I don't know, enthusiastic. It felt like, I'm passionate about the existence of AEW. So if we can tap into that side of them, you know, people might do it. You know, Ewan and Chris Elliott here saying, you know, Chris Elliott saying he's a big rated R, a fan of that run back in the day. You know, if you can capture some of that for those fans, that probably, you know, maybe we're not representative, or at least me. You know, maybe there are people out there who are going to come in the droves to see Edge get a run outside the WWE in fresh circumstances for the first time in his career.
Exactly, and there's a novelty value to this. You never know, you might end up with him in New Japan. That'll be intriguing, given how some of those boys like to drag out a match. Some of that could be deeply fucking painful. So yeah, be careful of what we wish for. But I think at least we're going to know very quickly what kind of run this is going to be, because, like I say, they're doing the thing where he's going to be on Dynamite, he's going to be on Collision. They've announced a match, haven't they, for already, like the him and Luchasaurus match. So he feels like they're kind of throwing him into the mix in order to get that kind of bump. And I imagine Collision, you'll be on that a lot, particularly obviously given the fact that it's the lowest rating ever. Is it 327,000? I mean, like that's up against NXT No Mercy.
The pay-per-views seem to have a real impact on that, but we'll get into that as we go. Yeah. But yeah, maybe a Noah title run is coming, as Platt says. You know, maybe we'll get that. And yeah, a lot of love in the chat, you know, for 2005 to 2009 Edgelore along with me. Maybe they can bring Lita in. Maybe we can revisit that and bring something else. But it's going to be one I think we will. We'll find out sooner on. We'll find out what the tone of all this is. What his promos are going to be like. What his matches are going to be like. If he really does have fresh ideas, and yeah, kind of how he approaches it in the weeks to come. But I mentioned there, JP, we'll go through the top stuff on the show, which includes this main event. You know, I mentioned there about Edge and Christian being critical of AEW in the early days of the podcast, and yeah, one of the things they might have mentioned was people taking daft bumps, of one of which happened in that main event, to the point where did you not think like I did that Christian got Darby up there and just thought, I'm not doing this. This isn't safe. And just dropped him, didn't he? On the I suppose it's not necessarily safe to just drop him on the floor either. But I felt like he changed his mind. I felt like he was like, oh no, I'm not doing this. This is too much. And then Darby was like, no, you dickhead, do it. And made him do it the second time. I can't say it did that to the match. And as a main event, even if I didn't love the post match, and that really actually the second part of the post match was what I didn't enjoy because it undermined the first part of the post match, which you know, on another pay-per-view would have been the focus, which was the turn we all expected. But I actually did think as a package, main event was really good. Like really, as far as you know, maybe not the in-ring highlights of the show. There's a couple of other matches I'd probably give that a couple of well, at least one match of the year candidate in there. Fantastic main event, I thought, you know, I had doubts about Darby and Christian going on last 2 out of 3 falls after 5 odd hours of wrestling, but can't say they didn't deliver. Really, really enjoyable stuff.
Yeah, I think they did. Like this was one, and that post match, the first part of the post match, had me jumping up and down, punching the air because I was like, because I loved it, and I want the second part of that to come. Much more of that in a bit. I thought it was like the main event was very well paced, just in terms of when they had the falls. The fact that they had the count out after that, and I agree with you because of all the wrestlers, you can't say, oh, I've lost my grip because they're a bit heavy. Not really. Doesn't really work with Darby Allin, does it? Of all people,
no.
Like that's part of the problem. He's not like a difficult man within wrestling for him to pick up, and it was horrible. It was absolutely fucking horrible. I mean, even Vicky saw it earlier on. She was like, Christ, like
he half handed on his arm, didn't he? Like as much as his back. Oof. Darby, man, I love him. I do get an enjoyment out of it. I'm not gonna lie, like I get a sick enjoyment out of it watching it. It ups the level, you know, as far as the violence goes.
And also, can I say as well, this is probably the most we've spoken about like the TNT title in how long, really, for this? Like in terms of like somewhat establishing it. This storyline has done a job, and I'm not averse to the idea because in some ways I'm thinking of if they're going to be doing pay-per-views every month, they're not always going to have world titles on there, as we've kind of already seen. And I like the idea possibly of moving the I mean, I would have thought, you know, at some point if they, you know, you do the tag titles, if you do a December pay-per-view and you have the Bucks FTR, and you're not going to, well, they might do it on TV is the other thing I've seen theorized with that. But the idea of moving around that big match position, because I think it did give it a good degree of kind of like prestige. And I was never bored. And I was expecting in some ways to kind of struggle through this because of like how much of this show I felt like I'd had to cram in to get to this point. But I was really pleasantly surprised. I mean, it's weird that the referee can just let him undo all the ropes underneath the ring in order to bear the like kind of boards underneath. Proper big thick planks of woods, by the way, not fucking plywood.
Well, that goes into the WWE thing, doesn't it, as well? Where like that's okay, but then you have to do a ref bump so that we can do a belt shot. Like, I mean, at that point, like, does the belt shot really matter? Okay, guess it does. Whatever. That's AEW.
What if Joel Matip just decided to start like just tearing up the turf when he was playing Spurs last week? Like, I think the referee would have something to say about that, wouldn't he? You can't just kind of do that. But he did ignore him as he went all the way right by him as well to kind of do that.
But it was a good. It worked though, timing wise though, to do it while we were taking. You know, it takes fucking ages to do that, doesn't it? So it works. I always like it as a visual as well. You know, when you know Bully Ray used to do it a lot, or like the LAX versus LAX match in TNA where it was just on top of the board. That was very Impact. Sorry, that was a hell of a visual. You know, when it happens, it's like it is shocking, and like some of those bumps were nasty. You could see you know, Darby doing the coffin drop and stuff like that, landing very differently when it's a no longer cushion ring. It's you know, it's always, it adds again ups the violence, which I think this to be the main event kind of needed.
And it did need it, didn't it? Like, if you're considering the amount of stuff we had on the show, you did need this to be that bit different on there as well. But it worked ultimately. And I think to get into the finish, I think the heel turn most definitely worked for me. I'm completely buzzing about potentially seeing that. I think that's something that I'm really excited about as
Because
well.
the mum didn't turn.
That's coming, mate. In order to win her son back, she'll have to go out with Christian. We're going to see that. We're going to see some sketches on that. Trust me. But I punched the air when he did that. And like, if he can deliver a promo, you've got gold there for a bit with this, with him and Christian. Like,
I think
you know,
it's worth a try in it because I think like there's a danger. I think the warning is Sammy Guevara, who you know they constantly try and plus as a heel, and his wrestling style doesn't fit it, and you know it doesn't work. Like you could see that happening with Nick Wayne. The difference is Nick Wayne's so young. You want to try this stuff. You know, it's too early. I've been saying this like so early in his career to throw him out there as like a babyface having like long matches on Dynamite. Like he's not at that point yet. Like let's do some development in 10 years, maybe he might be ready for some of the spots he's actually been put in already. So, but if you are going to have him there, you've got to try and, you know, develop him and make him better in different ways. And, you know, it might, we don't know yet. It might pull a dick heel charisma out of him, mightn't it? It might be, you know, him and Christian might end up having really good chemistry. It might have an influence on like his wrestling style. Like, you don't know. These are the types of things you probably want to do with someone like that. It's I think it's an inspired move, even if stylistically it might be a tough fit, at least at first.
I keep on thinking, like you mentioned about the Jericho comparison of it going those ways. I think it's just you get the idea with Christian that it's quite strange because he's so good in his role. It kind of is all about him. But at the same time, he gives enough to the kind of like to the baby face at least, whereas all the Jericho segments ultimately end up always being about him, with him in the focus of it. And what is Chris Jericho doing? And I don't, and I think in some ways, but you're not saying that because you want to, you're saying that because it's kind of forced down your throat. Whereas with Christian, it's like, actually, this is genuinely enjoyable. That's part, I think that's the thing about it. And you think him knocking around with him, like he's going to have the kind of sense of like, well, I'm going to want this to work because this makes his longevity go on, like Christian's longevity go on. And we can't forget as well, he's 46. We're doing splashes off the top through a fucking stretcher. Like all manner of kind of mad stuff.
So you say that to describe him as old. That makes me think, oh, he's fucking younger than I thought. Like, is that all he is? 46? Like, actually.
He's a year older than me, mate, and you won't catch me doing any of that stuff. Like,
fair enough.
That's kind of like, that's slightly
Still,
terrifying.
though, I'm shocked. For the length of his career, you'd think he'd be closer to 50 than he actually is. But yeah, I could see them playing off each other well. I think with the Christian character, I do think they're in danger of jumping the shot with that. I mean, I get people laughed at, you know, with talking about Antonio Inoki's grandkids and him being dead in the middle of a very serious segment. Cut to Christian watching at the back, like just for a cheap laugh. Like, I don't know. I mean, it wasn't unfunny. I'm just, you know,
it made me laugh.
That line. I suppose.
I know.
Fair
it's
enough,
childish.
but like,
Yeah. But you're allowed to laugh at stuff that you go, oh, for fuck's sakes, really? You big up Antonio Inoki and it's just somebody does that as well.
Ballsy to do it when you know, paid all this money to do the Inoki show, but you know, whatever. Overall, yeah, I got a lot of enjoyment out of it, and he's very, very good in the role. I will say before we wrap on the match itself, a couple of other notes I wanted to mention. Like, I love the falls in this one. Were done so well. Like the payoff with the turtleneck being that it gets used for a roll up, and you know they were too close to the ropes, and Darby pulled them back in. I thought it was just a couple of pros there pulling that one off, and Christian running around ringside with just like one eye poking out was just fantastic. Like, that was great healing, and I love the count out being the second fall as well. It made sense. It fit logically as well, and then it led into that big third near fall as well. I got 4.25 on it, I think. Probably my third favorite match of the night as well. So that tells you what we're in for when we get into this. But yeah, fantastic. Love the turn afterwards. Didn't love the edge stuff, but I come with a lot of baggage with Adam Copeland. As Matty said, let's check in 6 weeks. Let's see how I feel about it. I think he said 6 months. Actually, I don't want to wait that long. And we'll see what I think of the edge stuff.
It'll feel like 6 years, possibly. Depends.
But yeah, I think you're right as well about I think Nick Wayne's mum that'll be the next step of the story. I think you probably could. The amount of focus they were putting on her, she's gonna have to be a part of this story. Coming up, you'd be fuming if you were standing behind her, wouldn't you? Fucking hell, didn't sit down the entire night.
We've moved a long way from rankings, haven't we? In AEW, this is kind of it.
It is very Russo.
WWE. It's very, very Russo. It's very sports entertainment, but he's very good at sports entertainment. What can I say? That's the thing that he's proven.
There's a line to be walked, but overall, they're walking it quite well. But if that wasn't the match of the night, I think there's probably two other candidates for it. Where do you want to go first, JP? Hangman Swerve or Bryan and Zack Sabre Jr.? Hangman Swerve feels the most meaty, I suppose, as far as like story stuff goes. That was another massive highlight of the night for me. Absolutely. We'll go there first. Absolutely love that. I was ready for it, and I've been ready for it for Swerve to get this run, but this felt like a superstar being made, and there's some negatives to it. I think, I almost felt bad for Hangman with the crowd turning on him, but I almost think like I've got a rock comparison for both of them. I think with this one, in that like this felt like, remember what was the pay-per-view we were talking about where Mankind and Ken Shamrock had the three-way breakdown? Is it the three-way cage match with the Rock? And I remember being like, we were talking about in the Deadly Game show, and like as a kid, kind of going, "Oh, I've got permission to cheer for him now. Oh, cool!" And it kind of felt like there was like this groundswell of, "Oh, this guy's like the cool." Hot at right now, whether he's a heel or not, and eventually he became like a bit even bigger heel, and it worked out well. That's not exactly what's happening with Swerve. I think obviously he's gonna stay heel, and this was a hometown thing. But for it, it's a negative to Hangman as the babyface in the match. It did make Swerve feel like an even bigger star here. It was like, oh, okay, this is a guy who belongs in this position of the card. This felt like mission accomplished for me, this match. This felt like, as we were saying, we wanted to see, a longer term story with this. I think we're getting that. I don't think this is going to be one and done. We wanted Swerve to go over and look strong in the first match. We got that. I think, if anything, Hangman Page is like, a character, at least at this point, and you can't do it forever. That's a WWE thing they fall into. Well, if we keep beating the babyface, then they'll just get more over. It's like, right now we should lose because right now he's in a funk, and the story is going to be the comeback when he eventually does beat Swerve. That's the nuance that I don't think Road Dogg ever got. The Memo one when wins and losses apparently didn't matter. But like, you talk about wins and losses mattering. Like, I was on the edge of my couch for this one. Like, I was literally, I don't get like this much in wrestling anymore, but I was desperate for Swerve to win. And I was so happy when he did. And I bought the near falls that they had there. They made it feel like, oh, here we go. Hangman the Booker's favorites going over yet again. But like, they nailed it. Like, and it was like a masterclass both in near falls. I think Hangman did a great job considering the negative crowd reaction. That's my other Rock comparison. He leaned into it. He didn't avoid it. Didn't ignore it. Wasn't a babyface who pretended he'd gone deaf. He knew it was happening and he went with it, and it made it feel all the more special in doing it. And it was just a really well laid together match. Like, even my usual negatives on Swerve stuff, as much as I love him, his offense could be a bit Indian hokey for me. I feel like everything he did made sense, even down to like similar. Maybe a negative is similar to the Christian match. They did a spot where the refs came out, and he did the double stomp, didn't he, on the apron? But it made sense. Oh yeah, Hangman would be sitting up because that's like the position he's in because the doctors are looking after him. And then they did that stupid double stomp in the corner that Swerve does, that Alberto Del Rio does. They had like a realistic way into that. Everything fit, and it was like, it just felt like one of those nights for a character, right down to the entrance coming out in his best fucking top shop jacket, next to Prince Nana doing the goofy stuff, which again, for some reason works because Prince Nana, the more goofy Prince Nana is, the more seriously you take Swerve. So that's a win too. It just felt like a night where all those things I just listed just fit it, just landed perfectly. And it was the night that Swerve Strickland needed, and it was the night he got. And I loved it. Absolutely loved it. Thought it was a fantastic match in itself as well. And yeah, credit to them both, and credit to the AEW booking on following through on someone here, JP.
Yeah, this was, for me, the match of the night, simply because it was the match I ended up caring the most about. And that's probably because I put a tenner on Swerve Strickland to win and won 11 quid back.
Oh, did you? You said the odds were the other way around, weren't they? Hangman was the favourite.
It was 5-4, and it was like 11-10. It was like, this is in a 2-horse race. Like, this is the thing that logically they should be doing. You mentioned a lot of the stuff. The thing I had first of all written down was like, this is a star-making performance. And you have to remember, this is the fourth show on the pay-per-view at this point, the fourth match, say, on the pay-per-view at this point. So it was like feeling, already this is where the crowd completely picked up, and you could tell they were massively engaged with the story because they wouldn't have cared to the degree that they did. This is sort of going beyond hometown. This is like, actually, this guy's cool. Like, this is a cool act that works. and his tone and his demeanor, he just feels like he's nailed it. Of this is who he is. And like you say, you had the fact that Hangman was embracing the booze, the fact that the match itself wasn't frenetic. Like it felt like because the crowd was into it, when you had moments with Paige working like Strickland's hand and like Strickland working Page's arm so he can't do the buckshot lariat, which ended up paying off within like, you know, when he does end up hitting it as well. And I know you had like minimal interference necessarily, like kind of like with it like along the way as well. So it wasn't like it did all of the things that you want a match like this to do. And like ultimately, say with Hangman losing, does he actually lose anything? No, he's involved in like what feels like a really good program that you want this to last a while, where all the build to this had been brilliant. If this had been the main event, I think that's the only other thing, and the only other reason.
I wish it had gone on that, though.
Yeah, in some ways, like, but Edge was debuting, so like, but you could have had that in the middle of the card. Yeah,
probably not, but that does go to Steph's point that we're emphasizing bringing in the the 50+-year-old instead of your next big star. But I get it. Practically that's kind of how it goes. I was going to your point there, what you said about you're absolutely dead on. That was something I kind of noted. Swerve didn't win this because he was a coward. He won this because he was willing to be ruthless. And that is how you put over a heel and keep them a heel. And I know there's there was a lot of cheers there, and it was whose house stuff doesn't help with that sometimes. But like that's how, if you want to get a heel over and make them dominant, and again do it in a way that like Hangman Page can come back from this and can have that story of building back to hopefully getting his win back, which again is one of the rare times I do that. I'm not a 50-50 guy, but I think you can in this story have your cake and eat it too. I thought it was perfect for that too. Just awesome.
Yeah, this is just looking at Strickland now, and you just think of all the component parts. Can he do it in ring? Yeah, because you were looking at his offense as well. And you mentioned like it was slowed down, and it was much better for that as well. Because Hangman's on top for like quite the majority of this match.
Felt like a main event match.
It did, and it did feel like a main event match. He can do it in ring. He's found his tone on the promos. Like he's just found the tone, and he's found the look of his character. It helps. He's a good-looking guy in really good shape. He has that kind of like he has that top guy kind of physique to him and look with this as well. And he has a banging entrance theme, and he's got an entourage, which kind of helps in terms of making him feel important. But he wasn't relying on the gates of agony to come in and like make him do that. Not on these kind of matches. And it should be the kind of stuff where you go, actually, if we're doing a pay-per-view every month, in 2 months' time, a blow-off cage match between these guys is like, that's the kind of thing you go in. But you have to keep it between them two. I don't want to see the Young Bucks getting involved or anything like along those. None of that. This has to be between these two guys. And this is the match where Hangman kind of goes out of his funk. I think you could even get away with him losing the second match, even though he thinks he's going to do it. And then the third one, he ends up winning with that.
Yeah. You can say both masters. I think just by the virtue of Hangman being, like I say, out there on his own, standing on his own 2 feet. Unfortunately, he's got the ROH Trios belt to deal with Rod and Todd. But like, the presentation here is the Hangman Page presentation. I will say it till I'm blue in the face. Been critical of Hangman. It's mostly been his booking and his handling. Maybe some of the the way he's dealt with it. I think he definitely deserves some blame over these last 18 months, along with the creative behind him. But never been in doubt. Like he's top 3-4 wrestlers in this company and should be treated as such and should be presented as such and should be a star of that level. And like you say, even in losing here, just by virtue of being in a real actual main event civilian singles match that meant something and had stakes attached to it, did so much for him, like even in loss. And yeah, I've got to say to answer the chat there, Prince Nana, like I'm happy for him too, because he's a fucking it was like you don't want to attack. You don't want to like. It's wrestling people, so your interactions with them, are always centered around that. And you've got to understand that workers will work. Yeah, but back in the day, Prince Nana couldn't have been a nicer bloke to us back when I was doing like the ROH bus stuff and all of that. He like a lot of dickheads on that bus, unfortunately. But he was fucking class act back then, and he was anytime I kind of ran into him in those shows, and it always pained me that like. I've got such a fucking soft spot for the Embassy, Jimmy Rave, obviously, and his sad passing, a couple of years ago. But just like that whole run, I loved it so much, and then it almost made me feel bad to then spend the next decade or so when he was in ROH doing like embassy reboots, going, let's jump the shark here. And then even when he came into AEW, I was probably, I was quite critical of like, this feels a bit low rent. It feels like we're doing a tribute act to, what he did well in, 2005 with Jimmy Rave. Like, it's fucking lovely to see that, like, nope, we're back. And he's got his mojo back, and he works as, like, he is, a little bit of light relief around the very serious act. But I think they've got that balance, right? Like Swerve stopping him from dancing on Dynamite last week was a perfect way to kind of do that act. And like I say, if anything, it benefits Swerve. It makes him come across as even more of a dickhead, and Nana's just being entertaining on the outside. And it's a bit of a meme, the dance and stuff, and them flogging the t-shirts and stuff. But nice to see good things happen to good people.
See the reaction when the music came on at the end of the match and he started dancing. It felt like that whole place was dancing with him. And we're saying this about LA Knight on the pre-show. Like, if it's over, you go with it. And this is over. Like, the dance is over. And it'll become, like you say, it'll become part of his shtick, where some weeks he'll be pissed off and he'll stop him from dancing. And other weeks he'll do what he did in the intro, which is just walk straight past it. Like, completely no sell it. And it plays into it as well. And I know, like the bigger comparison, and I know comparisons with The Rock are like the most dangerous thing in the world to do because they happen all of the time. But you kind of look at Strickland and you think to yourself, keep him as a heel. Just keep him as a heel. Resist any urges of, like, if he's, and he's been doing it in terms of his promos when he's been slagging off various cities and the rest of it as well. Like, he's been doing his utmost. Like, no, I'm a heel. I'm sticking with it. And that's an area they sorely lack on. Like, kind of
feels like they're doing a heel
heels.
I think they're doing a lot of that right now. Like, Jay's on the come up, Ricky Starks is on the come up, Swerve's on the come up. Like, a line of people up, presumably for MJF. We'll get into that in a minute. As some of as Ewan did say there in the chat, that this felt like the world title program. Yeah, that's because it doesn't feel like there actually is one right now. But we're gonna get there. But no, absolutely, and I love it. And I'm just happy that Swerve's in this spot. And I think there's the sky's the limit. Push it. There's no guarantee that he's going to be the top guy in this company, but I think he's got as good a chance as any. And yeah, it's good to see the creative matching. The work that he's doing. Long may it continue. Maybe they can put AR Fox back with him. That was great that I missed that. I don't know. Maybe that wouldn't make any sense booking-wise. But yeah, I think if that wasn't a match, what would you give it, by the way, star-wise? I went 4.25 on the main. What would you give this?
I would... this is where I get cowardly. I'd go 4.5 to 4.75. I think you could argue.
Oh, that high?
Yeah. I would. I'd probably go 4.5. That's where... That's instinctively where I am with it, but I enjoyed it. There was just all the component parts of this was just really, really enjoyable.
Main event heavyweight wrestling, wasn't it? Actually, you know what? Like 4.5 is absolutely fair on that. And yet somehow it still wasn't the match of the night, JP. So we move on there. Well, at least I think. I don't know what you're going to say. To the other big match of the night, which was Bryan Danielson versus Zack Sabre Jr. I know Moxley will be giving it 5 stars based on his commentary.
Tremendous commentary.
He's like, he skirts the line of going too far. And there was a point where when JR was out there too, it was just a bit much. Just a bit much. But he's like, how much he's enjoying what's in front of him, and then like him standing up and getting excited as like, they go to the finish and stuff, and just generally just marking out and fucking swearing his head off and getting fined for it. Like, you can't help but love it, can you? For the negatives there, the positives overwhelmingly overwhelm them, don't they? He's fun to listen to, isn't he, Mox? He seems like he seems like he'd be a fun guy to hang on with.
Oh, he was tremendous value in this, even from like some of the other lines when he was commentating. And I have to say, in terms of the commentary on the whole, in the main, this rotating the commentary booth thing, I don't mind it. I think it's quite good. I think it can, particularly the show this fucking long. I think you have to do that. So you're asking a lot of people to sit there for 5 hours. But I think it was only Excalibur and Nigel who were there throughout the night. But Moxley was just like, oh, this is brilliant. The bit where he was just like, they mentioned about showing Demetrius Johnson. They were talking about him and Kenny Omega on Twitch. And he was just like, he was just suggesting like Demetrius Johnson and Kenny Omega. Like, you just think it's going to be all fucking dynamite. That was tremendous.
Believable, though, isn't it?
Believable. But and he looked like he was well up for it, Demetrius Johnson. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen it, like one of the moves where he does like basically a belly to back suplex into an arm.
Oh yeah,
like just like one of the greatest finish. He just couldn't draw on pay-per-view. That was his kind of.
Well, neither can Edge, and you know he's in, so you can bring him in. You know.
He can appear for ONE FC as well. But yeah, Moxley was brilliant value for this. But I mean, this is as a match, like fucking hell, like it's as good. It's an exhibition match ultimately, isn't it? But if you're going to have an exhibition match, you're doing it between two of the best, and it's such a cliche, but there's a reason why they are considered two of the best technical wrestlers in the world. And the thing that for a long time I wouldn't have put Zack into that category, but he's massively improved on with his time in New Japan, is he works at a pace. And this was worked at a pace for me. And it was fucking brilliant. In one of that dragon screw, I was terrified. I thought, he's fucked his knee. He's absolutely fucked his knee. And somehow got out of jail for it as well. It's like, you know, if you don't like this, and yet it's like, you know, we like the wrestling side of wrestling as opposed to WWE as a company that we've always thought of doesn't like wrestling at all. And it's just sort of like an unfortunate thing that they have to do it because they'd sooner be making movies, as Vince famously said, and Beyond the Mat. This was felt like proper fucking wrestling. It's like one of the things I'd heard today was like 7.5 minutes before there was actually an actual strike in the match, which is just incredible when you think for how many wrestlers we've seen. Just, punch, and it worked. Like, don't get me wrong. I think, like, again, it wasn't like the crowd were like Swerve, Hangman, where they were really into it, which I have to say is kind of more enjoyable, traditional, what we think of as pro wrestling. This is a match and just delivering like a high level proper dream match between two people who are like the best in the world at their craft in terms of actual wrestling, and the fact they worked fucking seamlessly together as well. I mean, I don't know,
It didn't disappoint for me. I think the Brian Okada match just gets worse the more you think about it. I think on the night, like I said on the weekend show, there was a lot of Cope there, not Adam Copeland, just Cope in general, just like, oh, but it was still good. It was still good. It wasn't, was it? It was boring. And you know, obviously the injury didn't help things. There's another match that's a bit like that on this show. But it just, you know, the idea of the match in your head was better than reality, and that was almost my worry going into this one, that might happen again, you know, and it might just be, Brian gets to have a little wank in the ring to himself, doing going back and forth, doing transitions for Zack Sabre Jr. and, you know, having a bit of a rolling competition, like a Josh Barnett, mate, perhaps, if he got a match on the show. Oh wait, he did. You know, there's a risk of that.
Yeah,
and he got some of that. Don't get me wrong, he looked like you could just see it. Like I couldn't help but watch this match, at least the first 5-10 minutes of it, through the lens of Danielson looks like he's having a fucking great time here. He looks like all his dreams have come true of like and we can't say for the first time, because obviously there's the match in Coventry, which they didn't do a good job for my money of you know, showing anything of actually, or pushing that it even happened back in the day. Could they got Crystal and Spud, John Lister in to give their takes on that match way back when. But like, you can tell since that match and since Zack has become the technical guy, Brian's wanted to work him. And it was written all over his face. He was having the fucking time of his life, just going back and forth with him. They're just the silky smooth like transitions back and forth and stuff. And they got a bit of that for them. But the genius of it was the escalation. That's the key word for this match. It was the escalation of it. You got your 5-10 minutes of nice little technical wrestling at the start that meant something as well. You know, things that paid off as far as, you know, which body parts were worked and kind of paid off as the match went on. But it was that escalation in just seriousness and violence as they started, like, you know, the slapping each other when they were in the hole on the floor, and then the kicking each other in the face. And then that was kind of the story. It was a technical battle until it wasn't. And, you know, for his faults, Nigel's commentary, which can be, you know, putting over his feud with Brian more than what's actually going on in the ring at times, he was putting that over like, oh, Brian won, yes, but like he won with a strike. He won because the match, the violence escalated, and he won that battle rather than actually winning the technical battle. But it all flowed and it all made perfect sense. It wasn't some chain wrestling that happened at the start, unrelated to what happened later. It was gradual and it was worked, and there was a strategy for both until I suppose there wasn't a strategy, and that's what cost Zack Sabre Jr. at the end of it. And they just had, I'd like an almost like perfect match for what this match was supposed to be, even down to the post match. I love Zack not accepting the handshake. I love him wanting to have a rematch in London or Japan or wherever it is. It was just, it felt like, real, for those 20 minutes. Even JR was tolerable. That's how, snug and good the work was in this one. It was just the match that, when you talk about this being a dream match, this was kind of, I don't know, as good as it could be, I think. Maybe we'll see on a rematch, but yeah, I don't think it could have gone any better than this did.
Yeah, that's it. I think that's, in the era, you hear that phrase a lot now, dream matches. This was one because it had never been done on this kind of stage. But yeah, it was brilliant. I mean, in some ways I feel obliged to give it 5 stars. It's funny when like writing stuff down from the match that I like, I've written like, well, obviously this was really good. And obviously the exchanges were really good. And it was just like lots of things that I think, again, like in your head, you think, oh, this is just going to be brilliant chain wrestling and consistent like kind of movement. But like say, it started to get that bit violent. And that's the thing that kind of gives it that little bit of an added edge that you need for this. Yeah, I feel like I'm obliged to say 5 stars because it's kind of as good as the wrestling part of wrestling gets in many ways. And I think it lived up to the hype for it. I mean, I feel like I should be a contrarian and go kind of 4.75, but no, I thought this was.
No, it's got a good seat idea, mate. I'm not going 5 on it. I wouldn't give it 5. I'd go 4.75. No. Yeah, that's fine. It's a strong rating, isn't it? Like,
yeah,
it's not why it's not 5. It's why it's 4.75, and it's all the reasons we just said there. Like, yeah, fantastic.
Absolutely, yeah, brilliant stuff. Do it again in Japan, where Zack will really get something from it. And obviously they'll be able to kind of like headline with it and it'll work and it'll be the kind of match that will, if Ospreay's off, you see them doing after the Dome when Danielson wants to kind of go over and do a few matches, or do it on a G1 if Danielson wants to do a G1 next year, if that ever actually comes to pass. If they're going to play this final year thing, the idea that he'd go through his career without ever having doing a G1 is fucking ridiculous. He would have to do it. No, that's a physical slog.
He's not retiring ever.
Oh, he's not retiring. No,
he's full of shit. he maybe believes it. He probably believes it. It's not happening. Like, he'll still be in 2 years. He'll be doing this. Exactly. You could do a match like this with Zack Sabre Jr. with his eyes closed. Platter says here, why did Benno hate it? First watch, I was 4.5. It was late at night. It was a very long card. 4.75 was actually on the rewatch tonight. Is where I'm closer to that, but. Yeah, I think that's it's probably, is it the match of the year so far? It's up there. I think maybe I'd have Omega and Danielson higher for my personal taste, but it's up there. And yeah, it was on the show, which, like I say, 3 matches there, which I absolutely loved. And that is the biggest strength you can say about this show. 3 matches, very different from each other as well, and great for different reasons. So loved it. Yeah. Unless you're getting more on the match, JP, do you want to talk some of the other stuff that happened on the show? We talked about, a great, brutal main event with, with some gimmickry and a big turn at the end. We've talked about a fantastic technical wrestling match there. We've talked about Hangman and Swerve, which had, all the drama of a main event world title match. But we haven't talked about the world champion of AEW yet, because he was in the opener, JP. Doing his fun little match. I'll start with you know what? I'll start with the positive. I keep saying it. Logically, I think there's a lot of holes and problems with the way MJF is presented in AEW right now, and they all circle around him being the world champion, like they do. It's. I can't, with a straight face, go on about Roman Reigns on this podcast or the Bloodline and go, and they don't need the title to do all this, and they don't, by the way. If you watch fucking SmackDown lately, but I'm not have that same consistent opinion for this. Like, the world champion 2 pay-per-views in a row now has been doing this shit. I know there was the Joe match on TV, but does he need the world title to do this Adam Cole love story? No. Does he need the world title to shove one of the fucking, Bray Wyatt twins' heads up the other one's ass? No. Was it entertaining watching it, though? And that's where I do want to start before we get there. Yes, and I think a lot of this is where, I don't know if we disagree necessarily. I don't even think you strongly disagree with me on it, but maybe I'm putting more stock in that and kind of just, I am enjoying the segments, you know. On the weekend show, we talked about Dynamite, and while I didn't love the stuff on the boat, thought the stuff in ring was mostly well done, if a bit drawn out. The Jay White feud sounds like something more along what I'd want out of MJF, you know, a serious feud with somebody. I've done the comparisons. I feel he's doing an Eddie Guerrero bit right now, you know, being the rah-rah babyface despite all the cheating. He's obviously got his own spin on it, which you could argue is for positive or for negative. But, you know, he can say he got a body slam over. I mean, I would just say he's over. But, you know, that's cool. That worked. Everything he did in the match worked. As he said himself in the presser, the crowd were loud. You know, people are buying the T-shirts. People, as we might have heard on the pre-show, people aren't necessarily coming to the buildings, but all of those things are positives. The quarter hours are telling you, you know, as we talked about on the weekend show, Jay White segments, you know, through that quarter hour, like the audience actually rose, which doesn't happen very often, and MJF talky segments tend to do that. They're all the positives. It's just he's the world champion at the same time, isn't it? And, you know, like this isn't rare, though. How often do we talk about AEW's feel like it doesn't have a world champion? And here we are yet again, like in the MJF. MJF's the one we'll do the assassination of MJF by the coward Benson Richards instead of that Hammond Page podcast we did a couple of years ago. That's the negative, isn't it? Because I think I can call a spade and say I was very much sports entertained during it, and I laughed, and I would have cheered along if I was in the building and would have had a good time. But, you know, there's all those gaps, isn't there, JP? There's a lot of caveats there.
That's the thing. This comes back to the idea of liking things in the moment, where I have to admit I laughed and I thought, well, he's got this over to this crowd. And then you remember he's a world champion. And if you think about it, like the way storylines work in wrestling, all roads should lead to that person. And what are they doing? They're kind of more invested in their friendship and therefore the Ring of Honor tag belts than this, which I'm not even sure Ring of Honor cared about at various times. So, like, it seems bizarre that, like, it's like become like a bit of a storyline crutch. And the fact he's injured, and so I hate the idea of one person defeating a tag team by themselves unless they're like Vader and they're doing it to like two jobbers. I hate that idea, particularly if you've spent time, effort, and money on trying to do something with the righteous, to then just put them in there and treat them like they're a complete joke. Like,
still
the idea of
though. I love the song, but, you know,
I love
it'll be the intro and outro. Like, I'll be clicking along, you know. It's a bop, unrealistically.
Oh yeah, I've been banging on about that bloody theme tune for like what feels like years. It's a cracking tune, yeah. Ring of Horror.
Hot tag media always coming through, JP. They never said a bad word about them.
But it's no, never. At no stage do we ever bring up any of that. Not going to talk about some of the songs they've done. But yeah, ultimately, this is like, I thought to myself, the crowd like it, but it didn't really further anything. And this is, again, like you mentioned, it's your world champion. So, and it may sound, oh, you know, it's kind of, I like the idea perhaps that the world champion isn't having to defend it on every big pay-per-view. If you're going to have one monthly and you're going to do this and you can spread it around because they've got the roster to do that. However, there still has to be some element of substance, and this wasn't substance. It's like they got him on there, he's over. But it'd be like if, you know, Jesus, WWE would do this for, say, LA Knight, wouldn't they? But he's not the world champion or going for the world title. And MJF is doing that kind of level of stuff. It's very catchphrasy. It's very, like you say, sports entertained. Like that's my kind of fundamental issue with it, is we didn't move things along. It doesn't help that Adam Cole's injured, but yeah, I don't know.
The thing. That's the counter in it, because if you want not a serious outcome to this, but you want your big match, that's the match. And clearly now that Cole's injured, maybe that changed plans for this. Maybe that's why we did the Righteous and we didn't do the Kingdom. Maybe we are supposed to be getting, I don't know if that match was scheduled for Full Gear or anything. I don't think there's been any reporting on when the Adam Cole MJF match is coming. But that would be the counter, wouldn't it? We're getting all this fun stuff, but there is actually a serious world title program happening in front of your eyes. It's just, you know, the wool's being pulled over your eyes, isn't it? While they tell that story with MJF and Cole. That's
have Roderick Strong as his partner.
I was surprised they didn't do that.
yeah, that would have made sense. They could have had that, and it would have been like, okay, I want you to team with him because you're both my friends and I love you loads. So why don't you team up together? And that would at least then play into what I think the overall story is, with say a Kyle O'Reilly coming back or whatever, like being one of the people, and all that kind of stuff that they can do and they can get to. But that in turn at least would work within this storyline. I just think it just sort of felt a bit like, oh, he beats both of them, and he beat them quite comfortably as well. And I know this is probably like you say, I'm giving too much kind of stock to the righteous, but it's the kind of stuff that I always think WWE would do that. And I don't want AEW doing that. And this is very much like a WWE booking trope.
We said that on the weekend show. I was like, is he going to be like Triple H or John Cena or whoever it was in WWE beating up tag teams on his own? No, there'll be something. It'll be Roddy, or it'll be, they'll find out Jay White even. I probably don't think that would have worked, but I assume there was an idea. There wasn't. MJF wins. And he's having a great time doing it. And I thought what was really illuminating was, did you see in the presser afterwards when he was going to Brian Alvarez for saying that his match was a gimmick match? And he's again making this point of like, Ospreay can go out there and he can, I think he said this to Ibu in his interview with him on Wrestle Purist, like it was something like, Ospreay can go out there and do a load of flips, but I can get a kangaroo click over and a body slam over, and that's true wrestling. It's like, what it reminds me of? It reminds me of like in Brit Res, like the NGW type wrestlers who will be like, these indie kids who we watch, they don't know how to work. We go out there to Butlins and these kids go crazy and they buy their phone fingers and we get the loudest reaction and we barely even lock up. And it's like, yeah, cool. Wouldn't fucking watch that on telly, mate. I wouldn't build a world title program around it, mate. Would probably be the more akin thing with MJF, or I wouldn't put it in the fucking top, because more is expected of a world champion, of someone who's supposed to be carrying this company, and he's carrying it on a merch point of view right now. You can't argue that. The numbers don't lie. Quarter hours doing well on TV. Been in the toilet as far as ticket sales go, and I think he probably deserves a share of the blame for that. But it's obviously not as black and white as it being MJF's fault. I think there's a lot of company-wide issues that cause that. But yeah, the company does feel like it's missing a top guy. It feels like it's missing a main eventer and a main event program, and they're letting Max have his fun and have a laugh and enjoy this stuff. And he seems to be chewing scenery, loving doing it. But I think there are more important things a world champion needs to be doing on your shows, and we said it all in, and it's kind of they main evented with it and got away with it, but now we're here, and yeah, I think it's time for him to do a serious title program, I think. And if it's not going to be Cole anytime soon, maybe that's the reason we got the Jay White stuff oddly placed, happening on a Dynamite and the lead into a pay-per-view that didn't have a Jay White versus MJF match. Maybe that's the serious MJF program that's coming, because as great as this pay-per-view was, it was missing that. It was missing that serious world title match, and yeah, that's part of the job, I'm afraid, mate. I think that's it's not harsh criticism to say it, and I don't think Brian Alvarez was wrong, and I think it says everything that MJF feels the need to pick this stuff apart, because I think deep down he probably knows.
Yeah, I think Simon Mulvaney's comment here, Maxwell Jacob Dixon.
That's the title.
What works for that? Writing it down already. If not, it's Adam in all caps.
He's becoming a meme wrestler, Plop says. Yeah, there you go. It gets a reaction on the night, sells some funny t-shirts, but, is that necessarily Effie sells a lot of t-shirts. Effie gets a reaction on the night, but,
That's Danhausen.
Should he be your world champion? That is the question. But at the same time, I don't want it to sound black and white, because you have got to give him credit for, it's not all negative. Quarter hours are good. The t-shirt sales are good. There is just that other element of it as well, I think is important too. But yeah, anything else on MJF? Like I say, righteous. I presume back to RH for them, which is a shame because I miss the music. They did a good job building up. It was actually unlike most ROH guys who they just pluck out and expect. Yeah, it's so funny. Like, I think Tony Khan forgets that ROH has only got, like, how many subscribers are there on a club at this point? It can't be more than like 6,000-7,000. Like, how do people actually watching ROH TV? These are strangers. We don't know who these people are. When they ship some of these people onto the TV, I would say maybe a lesson was learned, because I think the Righteous did get a little bit of a showcase over the weekend's TV, and they did all that only for MJF to bury them anyway. So, oh well, you still lose at the end of it. We'll see. Outside of that, what are your highlights from the card? What else do you want to talk about next? What's the less pressing stuff we should talk about?
I suppose I do want to talk about the tag match, only in the
Mm.
sense if you're thinking of things that were, you could say, a disappointment. I mean, there's a reason for this in Mark Davis breaking his wrist. Like, was a thing that kind of would have obviously affected how the rest of the match would gone, but it was somewhat of a disappointment as a result of that.
Good.
But it was like, it's not like it was terrible or anything else like that. But it was like, I think the problem is with it at that point, what you were expecting in this match is kind of what you would have got a Royal Quest, which would have been absolutely tons and tons of big double team moves and loads of near falls, which is kind of the Aussie Open specialty that FTR loved doing. And we kind of got a bit of that, but it was very, very like restricted as a result of him like fucking up his wrist from the Power and the Glory move, which it was that, and in the fact that I think it was Carl Fletcher pushed FTR hair onto the floor as well, and that fucked up his wrist even more.
It's it's just logically, there's a gap there, I think, because Aussie Open, we know are good wrestlers. We saw the Royal Quest match. We saw their indie run. We know they're great. FTR tell us they're great. But again, this isn't EWR. This isn't just, you put your two great work rate teams together, match rate in 95, job done. Actually saying that even in EWR, there's an audience rating too. But like, you've got to also be over, and I think you're probably saying that if these had gone on first, maybe it'd be a different story. But I think it was asking a lot of a crowd after 5 hours to invest in a, big time, seemed like they were looking to try and go long tag team match at like hour 5 with FTR against Aussie Open, who were still kind of anonymous wrestlers in this company. I think it was just asking too much. It wasn't favorable to either team to put them in this spot. And I get it. It was your dream match card. So watch this. They're going to blow them away with work rate, but they didn't really manage that either. And you can blame the injuries as well. But I just think, as Simon says, Aussie Open lost overness in this match. I don't think their presentations, if I come with baggage with Aussie Open in a positive way, because I've seen their rise and I know how good they are. And obviously, and it's written all over everything they do, Kyle Fletcher, I think AEW see as some kind of future star that they want to, keep in prominent positions and eventually do a singles run with. So, there's that behind it too. And I know all that intellectually. And I know, I've got my kind of connection to them as a team, and it's cool to see them in this spot. But if I was just judging it on AEW TV, they're just the weird Aussie guys who shout a lot, whose characters have never really been defined. Are they associated with Ospreay? Well, he's with Don Callis now. They're still throwing up the fucking hand signs for what you call it, the Kingdom, the Royal United Empire. Like, they're not in New Japan anymore. Like, why are they still doing that? Like, I don't know who they are. I don't think I'm ever going to know who they are, because every time they get a chance to show they are, Davis just screams at the camera and pulls faces.
No,
it's awful. It's low rent. Like, they come across in presentation low rent, and they are fantastic wrestlers, but I think there's got to be a connection there as well to the audience, and good matches isn't the answer to every single problem. And I think that's where they're lacking, really. And I can understand people who haven't seen them, they're past JP and aren't aware of how good they are, just going, why would I think any more of them than I do the Workhorsemen based on presentation in AEW?
I can't disagree with that.
By the way, just saying.
Yeah, it is the thing where, as well, it didn't help that they'd lost a couple of high-profile matches. They'd lost to Jericho and Guevara, and they'd lost.
What the fuck was that about?
I don't know.
If you had this planned, what are you doing?
I don't know. Like, ridiculous, isn't it? Like, and they got to this, and like you say, you're hoping the work rate carries you through. And I think then at that point, like, what is their, like I mentioned earlier on, is the kind of big finales is the thing that they always feel they've got down. Those like high-paced, big, like kind of explosive double move combos and the rest of it. And you saw it with like the Shatter Machine and stuff, where like I was impressed they managed to get something off there, but it was bloody hell, that was messy. And like I say, Mark Davis isn't actually like that, but like I say, he's like gurning for the camera with a haircut that is like kind of very much like an NRL player would have. Like, I don't know, like it's exactly what I would expect it to be. And you kind of watch it and you're like, okay, but you expect something more to them as well. Like, like you say, character-wise, if you want them to kind of mean something.
They're just not connecting.
Nah, and I think that's the thing, is you just need to give them, like, it's going to take time, but you just need to give them matches and wins where they can demonstrate, because guess what? They do have enough, like, kind of, you mentioned the workhorseman. You put them in the ring with workhorseman for 10 minutes, and you're going to get a good match out of it. You think you're going to get something out of that as well. But that stuff takes time, and they've got a lot of wrestlers in there, and you do worry that, like, okay, that was the big chance that they had to make that big impression on a stage, and it didn't work. But like you say, you put them in the 4-hour mark of a 5-hour pay-per-view, that crowd, like you say, who, you know, want to get to that main event, like, you're going to be struggling.
Definitely. And like I say, the injuries are a massive factor too, so I'm not unsympathetic to that. But yeah, it's a 3.5-star match in the end. And yeah, it's again, even if it was better than that, there's a lot of good wrestlers in this company. You need reasons to decide you like these good wrestlers over the other 120 good wrestlers in the company. But enough said on that. What would you give it star rating wise?
I'd probably go 3.75, because there's some good stuff in there, but like, it just nowhere near the levels. I mean, I love the Royal Quest match, and it wasn't near that.
No, and that's a crowd familiar with them and stuff as well. So yeah, that's baked in. But so yeah, carry on backwards. Maybe that makes sense. Next biggest match we haven't talked about yet. The Don Callis family of Sammy Guevara and you know, a few lines below, smaller text, Will Ospreay and Crochet Takeshita, because this was the fucking Sammy Guevara show, against Chris Jericho, Kenny Omega, and Kota Ibushi. Who asked for this? Who asked for the Sammy Guevara run? Like, I honestly, I can't remember what we predicted on the weekend show. Someone needs to keep track. Maybe we could have a title belt. We could figure something out. I hear that works. Like, I just assume Sammy Guevara's in these spots to take the pins, because that's what I'm going to. That is my absolute ceiling for Sammy Guevara at this point. I'm done. I just don't think he's got any. People say he's got like potential. You can only dine on potential so long. This is who he is. Undercard heel who does probably too many flips to really be a heel, but he's too unlikely to be a face. But you can find a use for him on the card. Absolutely, he could be the third guy in a stable. Was it just me, or was this match built around him? Like, to a ridiculous point, I was like saying to Steph, like, I've forgotten Ospreay's in this match, and maybe the blame goes to Ospreay for not taking that spotlight, and Takeshita for almost allowing themselves to get outshined by this, you know, flippy Sammy Guevara, who's, you know, can't lace either of their boots, if we're all honest, as far as being like grown-up wrestlers who can do that style to a main event level. Like, they faded into the background. Takeshita's I'm worried about this Takeshita Don Callis thing, because I think Don Callis' worst instincts are to get himself over rather than his act. And Takeshita does feel a little bit like he's not the lead of this act. And in this match, especially so, like I say, it was all about Sammy Guevara, to the point where, like, I was turning to Steph going, like, is it me, or is, like, Sammy had like 90% of this match, or does it just feel that way? Maybe I've not rewatched it back. Maybe in reality that wasn't true, but it certainly came across with what was emphasized in the match. But it was like, well, at the end of the day, he's going to be taking the pin, so it is what it is. Or, you know, his team's going to win, but it's going to be Takeshita pinning Kenny, or it's going to be, you know, something like that. No, Sammy pins Jericho at the end of it. So as well as like being the focus of the match, he's also the focus of the result. And he got fucking best wrestler in the world, possibly Will Ospreay, stood there. And Takeshita, who's not far behind him, or for some would be in that conversation, stood there. And they felt like B-plus players to Sammy Guevara. Like, what are we doing? Like, I just wish Jericho and Sammy were just in a separate thing, and we just got the straight tag. Didn't even consider that until the night. I was like, yeah, you know, for everything to say about Kota Ibushi, Kenner and Kota versus Takeshita and Ospreay, I think I prefer that. Like, because we wouldn't have to deal with this Jericho versus shite. Sorry, long rant.
No, I'm not in disagreement with you. I just didn't know why Will Ospreay and Kota Ibushi were there. You could have removed them, and it would have made more logical sense if this is the match that you wanted to have. Because otherwise it was just an unnecessary expense bringing in Will Ospreay, who seemed to be more cupped than he was man by this, judging by his back as well, which shows you like the kind of damage he was in. That might have played a reason why he wasn't in there necessarily as much, but why have him there in the first place in many ways? Like that's kind of how I ended up feeling about it, because, you know, the fact that they'd had Omega and Jericho was, I think they built up on Collision as well, and you know they'd had their teaming together, which I couldn't really care about it. That's the problem with this, is ultimately who came out of it. It's kind of a feud I don't care about, and one that's happening far too late in Chris Jericho and Sammy Guevara. I couldn't care. I'm just not interested, and there isn't anything that I think Sammy Guevara can do that can make me interested in this.
He's had enough chances. He's had enough.
Yeah,
like, not enough for Tony Khan, obviously, but he's had enough. Like, he has.
I get that he likes him, but that doesn't necessarily make for me having an entertaining viewing experience. I'm sorry if I feel self-centered like that, but it is my viewing experience to get to choose how I want to enjoy it. And like, you watch this and you plonk down money and you just think to yourself, that's what we're kind of getting here, is this feud, which I don't care about, because it's very weird, because the whole thing kind of started off with Jericho as a heel. Effectively, all the people leaving
so
Jericho. It's so like the storyline itself is just like bad, and they've just
and now, as Steph says here in the chat, like, you know, the Golden Lovers have reunited. In comparison, it's like Harry and Louis from One Direction. I don't know, finally reunited, and Kid Rock was there to make it a trio. But it's like, and the less PG version is it's the Golden Lovers back together. Oh, where's this old man in the corner? With his, you know, like, what's going on with the sloppy tits out? What are we doing? Why is he there? Like, yeah, I don't know. I kind of, you know, we weren't actually, people might have weekend show, hand to God, we weren't like, oh, it's another trios match. We actually gave this one a chance. I think we were like, oh, you know, for a stack card, nothing wrong with having a 6-man, and then came out of God. Fucking hate trios matches. I don't care if it's illogical. Hate them all. They're all shit.
Yeah.
Didn't know. What else can we talk about? Ricky Starks was on the show. I think that's where that conversation starts and ends. Shouldn't have been.
I just say he shouldn't have been on the show. It was a good match. The crowd didn't care. The end.
It didn't do any favors to be out there with Wheeler Yuta, like, you know, your boy. I heard our friends over at the What Culture podcast today reference. They gave me the credit, by the way, JP. I enjoyed it. For your Wheeler Yuta shout that they've put so much, you know, weight and money and time behind. Like, he's still not open, is he? Like, but like they were using your talking point there. He wasn't necessarily the problem, but he's not at the point where, like, you know, he can carry a pay-per-view match and on a busy card. Like, you know, this was just one match too many. It hadn't earned its spot on the card, and I get it. You want to have Ricky Starks on, you know, your pay-per-view. You don't want people to forget about him, because that is a criticism we will land at AEW. So, you know, I get that, but probably should have just done it on TV. If at the point where you ain't giving Ricky Starks anything important to do on the show, giving him this, especially when it followed Hangman and Swerve, just didn't make him look good by comparison, did it? So there we go. What else have we talked about? Oh, another one, tag team. I don't think the tag. We talked loads of positive here, a couple of negatives. I could have done without the tag match on the show as well. The Guns and Penta and Phoenix and Young Bucks and Orange Cassidy and Hook. Throwaway TV match with some fun spots that I forgot about 2 minutes after they happened. Again, if you were being, I don't know, I feel like you need an editor for these things, you know, like more. It's like podcasting, isn't it, mate? We could go 5 hours. You get more value for money if we go 5 hours, and the sickos might enjoy the 5 hours, but we're probably wasting your time once we get to our 4 lads. So yeah, I feel like you probably cut this pay-per-view down, and this, along with the Utah match, would be the one I'd cut.
Yeah, exactly.
If you have notes on it specifically.
Not really. I said on here, it was weird seeing the Bucks, Nick Jackson, botch a move near the end. That's just not something you see, because then you generally think of them as complete well-oiled machine in there. I just wasn't engaged by it at all. Like, and I knew the stuff in there that were doing stuff that was good, and it was, again, fun in the moment. But like you, if you asked me to remember stuff that happened, you know, it isn't there. Like, I see a fair bit of praise for the Guns as well. So we're like, friend of the show, Alan Farrell. They are really, really fucking good. They really are. Like, they're kind of like, you know, give them like a couple of years, and you're gonna start like really seeing them like as a good act. And they know exactly what they're doing, and they know how to play spoiler, which already, like in their very young careers, like that's a hell of an achievement. But yeah, this could have been on Dynamite.
Saying the Guns, they are like how many times does stables get put together in AEW, and you just like, they all feel like strangers and it doesn't work. Like, they feel like they've been paired with Jay White and Juice Robinson their entire careers. It's very, there was a comparison in this match to the New Age Outlaws, wasn't there, with them doing the double pin thing, you know, that the dad did, which, you know, was a funny spot back in the Attitude Era, and they tried it again here. But the comparison is absolutely there when they joined, like, different stage in their career. But I always remember that when the New Age Outlaws joined DX, like, they just straight away, it was like, yep, they're part of the stable, they fit. It wasn't forced, and it was great, and they had great chemistry. Same thing, they're right in there, and like it's elevated them. They feel part of a group, and you know, Jay White and Juice Robinson are chewing scenery as well. And it's just a great overall package, isn't it? It's a really good spot for them, and they haven't done that AEW thing where, and now we're gonna add, I don't know, fucking, you know, randos from like ROH are going to be in the stable now. All of a sudden, you know, we're gonna add Lee Johnson and Lee Moriarty, and we're gonna add fucking, you know, what's it called, Gravity or something like that to the stable. They've not done that, so I'm glad they've kept it tight. Good 4-man team, and yeah, I like them, and they're definitely coming along. And as Alan said, is it Colton, the younger one, is out? You know, only just over 100 matches, and you know, that's kind of a shocking statistic for how solid they're getting. Anything Chris Statlander to Julia Hart? I've got to say I wasn't into this at the start, but they pulled me in. Good stretch.
I did. I thought that as well. And they pulled the crowd in. The crowd was really into Julia Hart, and she is incredibly young. The test is always, though, with women's division matches, what exactly are they going to end up doing, and are they going to be able to, you know, like sustain this with an extended push afterwards for her? Because that's always going to be the question. Are they going to do anything like intro? What do you do now? You've had the build lead to the match. There is some crowd connection there with her. Obviously, it would make, you know, she was better than what I thought she would be. And I don't mean that in like a really nasty way, but she's, again, very, very young on a very high profile stage. And she was, and I thought she did well. Put it that way. I don't want to be going berserk necessarily over the match. I'd probably go like 3.25. But I was fully expected to go, oh, this one could end up bad. And I didn't want to see it because she is so young. So you don't really want to be critical of someone so young at that point in a kind of like a high profile spot. And she did all right. I don't think, like, you know, I'm not talking about her as the second coming of Manami Toyota, but at the same time, like, there's a lot of other people we've seen just kind of sink on a stage like this and the match kind of go off into nothing. And I thought she did well.
No Mercedes on the show. I think we were almost certain she was coming in. Dynamite, maybe. If anyone's listening to this Thursday morning, you might know already. Yeah. Collision, or is she not? Is she just like, I'm gonna go stick with go do that Jade match everybody wanted a couple of years ago, but doing in WWE. I did half expect it on this night, but then yeah, this is, you know, TBS title is obviously the TBS title, and there was no proper AEW women's title match on here, so probably shouldn't have expected it.
All these matches, I'm pretty sure they could have got another women's match on there, couldn't they? Really?
Yeah, I mean, it was the Dream Match show, so the match would have to be good, wouldn't it? But I'd say they've got their look. It's Saray is the champion, is what I'm saying there. And Britt Baker is the star, and you're not getting work rates out of them too. But there are. I'm not opening the arguments again. Yes, Shida's great. There are good other women's wrestlers on the AEW women's roster they could have done something with, and didn't. Eddie Kingston versus Shibata we haven't talked about. Underrated one. This kind of got forgotten by the end of the night, but I thought this was what it should have been. Hard hitting, tight. Felt like 15 minutes or so. I actually don't know the exact time on it, but it just felt like a nice little, not a sprint, but you know, they got a lot into what didn't feel like a particularly long amount of time. A lot of hard hitting stuff. Shibata took more bumps than I feel like I've seen him take, or at least higher angle ones. Some of the suplexes Eddie was getting him up for, I don't feel like I've seen him taking this AEW run, or at least haven't been notable ones. Sorry, me Amazon Echo's talking to me. I don't know if you can hear that. I thought someone was in the house now. But yeah, there was a lot of like high angle stuff, and yeah, taking obviously get more comfortable taking those big bumps because he was willing to take them for Eddie.
That'd be terrifying if somebody is in your house while like live for video viewers as well, so watching some sort of like in live in-person robbery.
The NXT show we're about to talk about on Sunday, like Steph said that, like somebody was just stood out the window looking in my window. Like I assume they were just a big fan of NXT, or more likely they walked past it. What the fuck, the size of that telly, and then realized it was a projector I had on. But a bit disconcerting, you know. Hopefully they're not trying to break in.
Mate, that's the stuff of crime watch nightmares. which links nicely to the pre-show. But anyway, there you go. This is the thing with this is it went just over 10 minutes. It delivered exactly what you'd want it to do. I don't think it had the drama that you would have kind of wanted, but it was never positioned for that. And it is like, it's almost like, well, we've got Shibata here. We have this Inoki theme, which I'm sure they've done. They spoke more about Inoki than New Japan have done in like sort of several years. It feels like it's like Christ, and that's the one place where they.
What was Inoki about the show? What was he?
Did he have a trademark?
Do we know yet what a WrestleDream is still? Like,
I can only assume this, and I'm completely hypothesizing that they had a trademark for the name. He really wanted it, and he went, "All right, I'll do all this Inoki stuff then, and if you really insist on it." And lo and behold, they did. So, yeah, I didn't like I say it's not bad,
including sorry. I was going to say, including Tony knocking over the we could talk about it on the pre-show, knocking over the Inoki photo frame, Rocky Romero with the save with that. What the big man would have wanted, you know, that and some of the matches we got on here, absolutely, what he died for.
I want to see the grandsons out of the urn going full Mariela Pena. That would have been like kind of awesome. like if they'd done that instead and then used it as a weapon as well. But yeah, this match, fine. Like I'd go like good in terms of the action, but like almost completely forgettable once it was over because it was lost in the shadow of so much other stuff, and they were just like cramming stuff in at this point. They were like straight onto the third match. There was no breaks between matches and stuff here. They were like straight into it.
Another one though, where like the positive is keeping Kingston in the loop. You know, how many times has he gone missing from AEW TV? Still in a decent, prominent position. And yeah, I enjoyed the match. I go maybe 3.5 to 3.75. But like I say, there was weightier stuff later on. But enjoyable and fit the theme, whatever the theme was. Speaking of the pre-show, yeah, that's kind of it really. Unless you've got any notes on the pre-show, got to see your boys TMDK JP. Speaking of low rent, they were on there. Any other notes from the pre-show before we talk?
Not really. I mean, I wasn't going as berserk for Josh Barnett, Claudio as I saw some people about it. They had a grapple on the floor for a bit over after 8 minutes. Like that pretty much was the long and short of it. I'm sure Claudio's doing Bloodsport or something like else on there. What was funny is that the crowd didn't know who Josh Barnett was. Certainly didn't know he was from Washington State, and they booed him because he wasn't Claudio Castagnoli, who was the wrestler they knew off the telly. They didn't know who fucking Josh Barnett was.
He's I know the grapple fuckers love him. And hey, that Moxley match in Bloodsport was a lot of fun. Outside of that, I just find them a boring blowhard cunt. Yeah, mate, you're a UFC champion. You know, I say that's fucking awesome. He was UFC champion, great. Well done, mate. Is wrestling though? Never been a fan. And again, they were very charitable to him, I think, in putting him over as this legend who was again. He fit. To be fair, fits the aesthetic, fits the the Inoki thing, and I suppose you have to live with him just being a cunt and, as always, going into business for himself afterwards and putting himself over on promo and booking a rematch, which felt for every part like they didn't have enough time on the pre-show for him to do that, and two, there's no way they greenlit building a Bloodsport match on AEW's pre-show. It's like the thing when he was chasing Jay White around the ring in New Japan. Josh Barnett. He's Josh Barnett, so he thinks he can do what he wants. And Steph will never forgive him for that, as she says in the chat there. Yeah, it was the little roll around. It was every mid-card Bloodsport match you've ever seen. And the sickos will have loved it. So I'm glad you all had a good time. Yeah, honestly, Acclaimed in TMDK, I would have left TMDK at home. I think Shane Haste and Mikey Nichols just come across as shindy, never was workers. Sorry, I'm being mean. I like Bad 2 Tito, but I don't think them two got anything to offer at this point. Am I being harsh, JP? Can you tell me you're big into the TMDK run these last couple of years?
Me and Australian wrestlers, like a whole lot of other stuff like that, I tend to go in for Australian cinema. But I mean, you didn't need to have this on there. But that's the problem with the 0 hour, is that's become bloated. That's an hour and a half. So you got half an hour, which is like, and I like RJ City and Renee Paquette. You lose 2 matches from this pre-show, put it down to an hour and have them doing the bits in between. I'm perfectly down with that. I have no issue with that as a package, but like it's like an hour and a half before the fucking pay-per-view starts. Jesus Christ. TMDK, they're in leave them in New Japan. They're fine. They're fine where they are. Did this match need to happen? Absolutely fucking not. As well, rather like the opener bringing over Satoshi Kojima. So there's another promotion he's wrestled in this year. Well, I know he wrestled in there, I think, at Forbidden Door as well, didn't he, against CM Punk? But like, he was in All Japan, he was in fucking Noah this year, New Japan. He puts up an Impact next, and MLW, which is his spiritual home, as we
you know, Core Power see that hasn't happened yet.
Oh, yeah.
Coming soon.
Slaughterhouse, mate.
Yeah.
He's got that deal with them now, hasn't he?
There you go. Could be something to that. So yeah, that's kind of it. Obviously, Tony Khan had his presser, and yeah, kind of set us up for Dynamite this week. Any thoughts on it? And we've got Adam Cole is going to be speaking on Dynamite this week, JP. So we're going to find out what he thinks coming out of the pay-per-view. Ray Phoenix v Nick Jackson for the international title. I'm sure that'll be good. And Takeshita and Sammy versus Kenny and Jericho. Probably not the tag team match I would have taken out of those 6 wrestlers, but yeah, some stuff set. More matches announced than last week. Last week's Dynamite had fuck all announced as we went in.
Well, it's going to be interesting. This one, obviously, they got it on Wednesday. The week after, they're on a Tuesday, so they're head-to-head with NXT. That's going to be interesting. I think that one they're calling Title Tuesday, aren't they? And already announcing. Is there other stuff for that they're going to be announcing there as well? So
that's the Edge match. Yeah. That's what's that. That's an Edge match on that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. They're going to have that on there. I mean, like I say, at least they're announcing stuff. Really, with this pay-per-view, I think the thing to take from it is there was stuff about the build for this was better. And it's particularly after we strongly disliked, is the polite way of saying it, the builds to All In and the builds to All Out. And then it felt like they were getting things back on track somewhat with the builds to like kind of Grand Slam, even if we weren't mad about necessarily everything that happened and not everything went off perfectly because John Moxley got injured. But here, they actually achieved the thing of delivering a show that effectively, like, it made sense, and there's stuff coming out of this. It's them continuing this, because this has been the problem with them, is very, very quickly as a booker, Tony gets bored and then he moves on to like whatever the new shiny toy is, and you kind of go, no, you need to stick with stuff, and you need to stick with it for months, and you need to do interesting things. So all of that, I want to see, well, what are Swerve and Hangman doing? Like, that's the kind of direction that I kind of think that's the thing to build up from that. You know, obviously it's going to be all about Adam Copeland, isn't it?
Yeah, we'll see where that goes. I mean, yeah, there's negatives, but I think the positive of what AEW have been doing the last while, there's been bits of it that maybe haven't been as compelling as AEW past, but you've got to give them credit for fundamentals being done well. You know, we're not losing track of Ricky Starks, Jay White, Swerve Strickland. Like, these guys, they're getting behind, and they're on TV, and they're in programs. You know, I know that's basic wrestling, but it's happening. You know, and I think they do deserve some credit for that. And we're no point in us going through our thoughts on Rampage and Collision at this point. That's the other issue with AEW right now, is like it is all a bit disposable. Like, Collision was a good show. Didn't matter by Sunday. It doesn't matter now, does it? Who cares that it was a good show? They're gonna have 3 more good shows this week. There's a lot, isn't there? And there's a lot of expectation on you as an AEW fan to kind of get through all this.
We spoke about the rating before, but surely part of my logic for not I watched it, but why people wouldn't watch it is actually to go, well, why do I need to watch it if there's a pay-per-view? I'll just watch the fucking pay-per-view. If they're already predisposed to doing that, why wouldn't you just go, well, I don't need to see this?
It's a bit of both, though, isn't it? Like, this, I mean, probably haven't got it loads of time to go through it, but like Brandon Thurston had on it, and it's actually a good link to the next subject. The Collision ratings from Saturday, like 327,000 viewers, lower than Rampage. 106,000, a 0.08 in 1849, which is fucking, you know, we're below movie level at that point with my limited knowledge of you know, American TV. But like, as Brander's kind of pointed out, like, over time we've seen that happen over and over again. Like, I think we knew it into actually going in, but all it takes is WWE to have a show on a Saturday and fucking Collision dies. Like, it struggles against pay-per-views, yes, and it struggles against other things. You know, there is it's Saturday night. You know, that's the other kind of elephant in the room. But like, I wouldn't have thought an NXT pay-per-view would be something that it could potentially struggle against, but I feel like it did. And I think that's a pattern that like Brandon's like keeping track of. That maybe I think his conclusion is that there's more of a crossover. It's not like there's these two universes of AEW fans and WWE fans. Like there's a huge like bite taken out of the collision rate, and any time there's any kind of WWE TV either on the other channel.
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting, isn't it, that you are going to like. I can see why you could come to that conclusion as well. I think it's just sometimes it's going to be that positioning, particularly on these pay-per-view weekends. That's going to be a thing that doesn't help with it. But meant to be delivering 500,000 and 0.20, and it is on a night of the week where you're going to find these trends. It's whether or not does it get back up to, and we find maybe 3 Saturdays of the month it does around 450 to 500,000, and say 0.17, where you might assume that Warner Brothers Discovery are okay with that in the main. But I think if it's going to be something where it's going to drop down to 300,000, but the key here in all of this is we've spoken about like in recent weeks after what felt like us being like very critical of the way that they were building to their big shows, actually seeing somewhat of like a better product generally, and a more sensibly booked, coherent product. You just need to stick with it, because as we see, the business doesn't always follow that. If there are stories that end up kind of catching fire, and you're doing your best to make those stories catch fire at that stage, that is the thing that ends up only being reflected later on. But you have to kind of have the patience to stick with the course, don't you? And not be reactive to what the viewing figures are going to be. And you'd say that a lot of the things they've been doing with Collision are generally good. So you need to keep on doing that, and you need to keep on going, no, we need to build to these shows. This is what we're going to do. Just don't need to book massive basketball arenas, because they're not at that point. And it won't help in terms of making it seem like a hotter product. Put them in a 4,000 or 5,000 building, and it'll feel like a hotter product, because it'll nearly feel sold out. And yet, do you know what? We'll get over the absence of massive LED screens. Then, in that case, I'm sure we'll cope for a few weeks if that's the case. But it'll make it feel like it's kind of a hotter product, rather than we can only film on this side of the arena, which is always something that I'm so self-conscious about now. And even here, like the Climate Pledge Arena's big enough, isn't it? 6,000. Like, you know, we've mentioned
which was like down a couple of thousand, wasn't it, from where they were in January when they were the same arena. But that's, again, it's the knock-on effect of having so many shows, you know. But AEW are naturally going to be in towns more often because there's Dynamite and Collision. There's more opportunities to see them. There's more of it to watch on TV. This is all going to stretch the audience. And you made great points there, JP. And I'll subscribe to your newsletter, and I do agree. But I've got to take it to its bottom rung and say, based on what Brandon said, NXT beating AEW next Tuesday? What are we saying?
If they stack it up, I think that's a definite possibility, because the amount of people who won't, it'll be that effect of people expecting to see it on a Wednesday, not knowing it's on a Wednesday because that's the night that Dynamite's on. Wouldn't be surprised. I think they will do, and I think WWE will they won't bleat about it in the way they would have done at times.
Oh, they will.
But I think
they will.
They'll do it.
I think they will.
They'll maybe do it in a slightly subtler, snarky way, less kind of Vince way. I would suggest that they'll okay. Then I'd grant possibly be a little bit of gloating then on their part, but they'll put Becky Lynch on there, and they'll put someone else on there as well. Like, they'll make sure that they do something about it. Yeah, and it has been working. It's been working for a while. Again, leads very nicely onto NXT No Mercy, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And yeah, we'll see what happens next Tuesday when the two go head to head. But yeah, you're right to say that, JP, is NXT No Mercy is next. Incredible intro. Love the game thing, and yeah, that's all I've got to say about the show. And no, I don't have more to say about the show. That was fucking brilliant, though. You could feel people being like, "Oh, I hate that."
Benno loved that opening.
Oh, it was so well done, because you could tell as well. Like, I in a previous life was very into like No Mercy Modern. Didn't get as far as necessarily doing too much of it myself, but I did a little bit, did a bit of guidance on it and helping people. I was on like all these like No Mercy forums and stuff like that. Still follow, there's like about 10 or 12 accounts who are still at it, who are doing mods to No Mercy. Like, there's only so many moves and people you can add to it, but you know, you can get like the AEW roster on it and stuff like that. this 100% was one of those mods. This wasn't like just somebody drew it up in like some kind of graphics program. Like this is clearly one of those like dodgy N64 No Mercy mods where someone's made the NXT roster and whoever was behind the production of it. If you haven't seen it, it's fucking brilliant. This video they did to introduce NXT must have got in touch with one of those lads. I'd love to know which one of them it was who did it from the old N64 No Mercy Zone forums that used to be out there. But yeah, it was so cool. And like, yeah, it didn't quite have the Diggity Dog in there, but it kind of did. And it had like the old school graphics into the character select screen. Best thing they did all night. You know, I've got some good things to say about the matches itself as well. But there you go. Might as well bring back No Mercy. Do a game next. Can't do worse than AEW Fight Forever. Which, by the way, like that. Remember that? Remember that game? Fucking hell! Like I was we were talking about the other day. I went on Twitch just to see. You know, it's not. This is a black and white JP as far as like, oh, what's the interest like in games? And I was like, okay, I'll see like how many people right now are streaming themselves playing WWE 2K23. And it was something daft like 450 or something like that. I was like, okay, that's a pretty okay number, not loads, but you know, game came out a while ago, understandable. 2K22, still about 50, 60 or so. Oh, that's a fair amount of people still playing it on Twitch. Guess how many people were playing AEW Fight Forever when I did this very scientific survey on, I believe it was Sunday afternoon, the day of an AEW pay-per-view, JP?
I want to say less than 10, something like that.
0. Not one person. I did do this on Friday and there was about 10. But when I checked on Sunday, not one person was playing. Not one. I haven't even thought about the game in months. Sorry, completely unrelated. Sorry, it got me off on a tangent here with the opening, but that's a conversation in its own right, isn't it? Remember when their updates come in, JP? What happens to them, man?
I know.
There's more of them. You get more of them in the fucking No Mercy mod world, anyway, to bring it back to No Mercy.
Haven't it's all, but I mean, what I would say is this is the first time they've ever used the No Mercy video game as part of like this.
We've all got a lot of nostalgia for.
Well. Exactly. And it was brilliant. The first person I thought of was you for this as well.
What do you think of NXT now? Like I think of you when I think of NXT because like when they ditched the black and gold originally, I don't know, we're kind of back to it now, but when they originally did it, I mean, you were quite negative on it, even though, you know, the glory days of NXT proper were gone. And they replaced it with, you know, young lads with gimmicks. And to be fair to Gareth, he was the voice of reason in the room, being like, I mean, is that not what NXT always should have been? Shouldn't it always have been developing young guys instead of bringing in 45-year-olds from the indies? Shouldn't it, whether we like Vince McMahon and his style or not, have been trying to produce wrestlers that Vince McMahon would actually like on the main roster rather than wrestlers that he's never going to use anyway? You know, there was a big question behind the old NXT, and now we are a couple of years in, aren't we? And like more than a couple of years on to like the Shawn Michaels era of NXT, and it's kind of it screams you a little bit to me. You know, you're someone who what's like, you know, you keep tabs on the younger football players, you know, like not quite the same thing, but you keep tabs on like the Women's Premier League and stuff like that. Super League, is it? That's about to start. You're kind of, you know, you grassroots, you're into like that, you know, that like what's the next thing who is like, you know, the standard might be lower, but like you know, you go in with an open mind and see who the stars of the future are. That's kind of what NXT is now. So I could see someone like you getting a lot of enjoyment out of it.
I think so. Where I stand with this, and I hate giving them credit, but they have done a good job because it actually has been developmental. They just feel like they're now developing people that they're actually interested in doing something with and bringing up to the main roster in a way that they actually want them to be. So it does more fit the remit of what they want. And it's just that these wrestlers, in the main, have gotten better over that period of time. And they've done things slightly better. So, like, take the tag match. They're all, you know, they're all very rough around the edges. Don't get me wrong. Didn't shit the bed. And there would have been a chance if we'd been watching a show like this where we would have kind of generally wanted to avoid it. But I watched this and I find myself watching it more with an open mind. I'm not interested in still watching the TV. I read the results and that's kind of enough for me at this stage. However,
how's TBL Parker doing?
Oh, he's doing great. Like he's going to be back. He's going to be back this week on the first NXT after the show. Hopefully, getting into that big Ilya Dragunov program. Hopefully, but they've used the big stars well, as we've mentioned, in terms of getting eyeballs on the show. the PC talent has gotten better, and they're probably a bit more kind of, okay, these are the ones that are worth sticking with kind of in ring. You know, remember the NXT show itself, even in the black and gold days, and when it first kind of was brought on as Triple H's, you know, kind of very big budget, create a super indie project. Like, they have gotten better, and it's going to be important for them for finding a TV deal. The timing of this is quite fortuitous because it makes it look like actually it's a TKO product, so it has that kind of brand name. They're always going to have that level of investment in it, but they might. Whereas I know they haven't got the TV deal yet, but I think all of this stuff is generally, it's kind of good news. The commentary is still the shit. I mean, I just see Booker T doing weird catchphrases and growling noises at this point.
Has he still got that job?
I don't know. I don't know, because whatever it is, it's not commentary. Somebody's there's conversation that's taking place. That's as far as I can tell there. But in the matches, I watched this, and I have to say, I thought it was a perfectly decent show. And you look at people, and I think there's a lot of over-egging of, say, Becky Lynch versus Tiffany Stratton and how good Tiffany Stratton is. Like Matty had said, like, was it Dave Meltzer had said that this was the best women's match since Sasha versus Bayley, and it was like better than Rhea Ripley, Charlotte Flair from WrestleMania this year, or like, you know, that was the kind of conversation we were having in the pre-show about this. But she looks exactly for what they want, like a hell of a prospect for them. Like, it's exactly the kind of like, and they're much more promising prospects. Like even Carmelo Hayes, who I'd kind of grown somewhat indifferent to as more of a character that could have, you know, standard matches. Thought the match with Ilya Dragunov was good, was better than I think I'd seen the first one, and it seemed like it was a better match this time round. You know, Dominic Mysterio as a kind of experiment worked, even if Trick Williams, his finisher didn't touch him in the slightest. That's the thing to kind of note from that, when he did his flying knee. But this crowd as well, there's a groundswell where this crowd really liked them and were into certain stuff from this show. And I think that's something you have to say. And they did, you know, a number there probably just under 5,000. AEW did 6,000 for WrestleDream. Like, if you want it, like, and I know they've got a juggernaut behind them and other stuff like that, but you're selling them on really only one star being there in Becky Lynch. But they're, you know, they knew these people. They weren't like completely like averse to the talent. They know who Metaphor are, for example. You know, and I think that's the kind of credit for it. It is finally fulfilling what they want. And if they bring people up to the main roster, you're convinced that Vince can go, who the fuck is this? And then just kill them. Because at least now, like, it feels like there's actually like a purpose if they are going to be brought up to the main roster.
Kind of, I don't know. It's a bit like Trick Williams' offense. It just kind of breezes past me NXT whenever I watch it. Like it's like, you know, I can recognize that, like, I don't really have many detailed thoughts, to be honest, on any individual matches. I enjoyed it overall as a show. Like, it wasn't a bad thing to throw on a Sunday night. I just find that I don't know what it is, whether it's the setting, the presentation, whether I'm just not built to kind of invest in something like this, but I struggle to invest. And Ilya Dragunov and Carmelo Hayes had a very good match in front of me, but it was like, you know, maybe it's just something to do with the NXT presentation or the fact that it is, you know, the B show, and it's, you know, I'm not someone who watches non-league football who finds it difficult to kind of, I mean, the BWE days are way back in the day anyway, but yeah. Of the show, who did I enjoy? Okay, Ilya and Carmelo. Like, I wouldn't go as high as somewhere, but kind of going on that. But, you know, Ilya's great. I would like to see him in a more serious place. I would like to see him. He's someone who I'd like to see on main roster, but he might be one of those disconnects still. Where, well, what would he do on main roster? Would, you know, he immediately be cast aside if Vince still has any power there? I don't think he's quite a Walter, where somehow Walter has been relatively bulletproof. Ilya is bit weird and small and has a very distinct style that I can't see them loving. But what I do love, I love his finish. I love the forearm to the grab the opponent. He makes that look fucking, for a hokey move, he makes that look great. And I enjoyed the finishing sequence that kind of led to him having to do that twice, even if, like I say, I don't quite bite on it the way it feels like people who are passionate about NXT do. Good little wrestling now. Carmelo Hayes looked good. I think he obviously got more that they might sink their teeth into on main roster. Yeah, Becky Lynch and Tiffany Stratton was all right. There's the elephant in the room that's obvious for all to see of why, you know, Vince McMahon and Bruce Pritchard and types like that might enjoy Tiffany Stratton. She's a bit of a throwback in some ways, but she can absolutely go, you know, when the bell rings. And yeah, I thought it was strong enough match, even if, again, you know, felt a little bit overhyped by the time I got there. No, I hated Noam Dar and Butch, but I'm always gonna. Can't stand rounds. Never gonna like them. It's a throwback to something that suddenly is a bad idea in the first place. You will never convince me that rounds wrestling is good. Although Gareth has, you know, tried to force me to watch some better ones from the 80s, but nobody wants it back, do they? Really, it's just a bad gimmick. This Heritage Cup thing, and you know, 45-year-old Noam Dar doing it with a 65-year-old Tyler Bate in Pete Dunne's corner wasn't for me. No thanks.
They had an entire points-based tournament to get to the point of just keeping Noam Dar as champion, which seems mental when you think about it.
How's he there? That's the thing about the Shawn Michaels. As much as you can say, like, the links to the main roster are better, he's got some weird favorites. Like, why is Noam Dar in the year of our Lord 2023 someone that, like, Shawn Michaels is high on, or like Gallus were on the show, weren't they? Like, turned up at the end of the tag match. Like,
they're never off it, mate. They are never off. I don't know.
Why does he love them?
I'll never. It's a genuine question. I want someone to ask him next time he's being interviewed. Why do you love Gallus? Just genuinely, just ask it like that. No pretense or anything else. Just ask them and say, like, seriously, why do you love him? It's incredible for it as well. But yeah, it just went too long because he had like 6 3-minute rounds. It was like, fucking hell. Like, I'm kind of knackered at this point with that.
By nature, rounds break up the story you're telling, and I know you can be clever with it. And there are, again, Gareth and the fetishists who love World of Sport will tell you there are stories you can tell within the, but like, obviously it's a negative. Like, obviously you're working around it rather than with it. Whatever, it's something different, I suppose. I enjoyed some of the gimmicks in the tag match. I think the wacky gimmicks NXT are doing, I think they're leaning into like something. I don't know whether it is this popular culture now.
GTA San Andreas, mate.
Maybe that's what it is. Why has everyone got a bike? And why does everyone have a bike and also doesn't actually ride it? Because they walk theirs out. Baron Corbin's like crawling his bike out. He couldn't have looked lamer. Like, he made Chuck Palumbo look cool. Like, what was that?
I've written he's basically on a Harley Davidson tricycle, like that you give to little kids, to like toddlers before they can ride a bike and learn how to use pedal, and they just use their legs to move along. And I've had this for all of my children at various points. He just had a Harley Davidson version because there was no space around the ring. He couldn't do any bloody, Undertaker in his gimmick chains going around the ring to fucking rolling. Couldn't have any of that stuff. He has to kind of carefully move it around because it's not that big a place that they're in. Whereas those other lads, I'm sorry, they were mates of CJ in GTA San Andreas. Like, they really were. They were like, it was comical beforehand. And that Mafia dinner skit they had there as well. I said, the phrase I've written here, there's playing on stereotypes, and then there's this. This was a whole other level on here. However, there were some fun spots. It's choreographed to fuck. But those Creed brothers do some slightly mental shit while also simultaneously looking quite uncomfortable in professional wrestling. It's quite a hell of a balancing act between them that they managed to pull off. It's like they're kind of good, but they also look kind of shit. And I can't quite define what it is, but it kind of works at the same time. And those Mafia lads, they're perfectly fine, but I'm waiting for some kind of complaint, like, or something like that. Because again, like, there is, like, it's, remember these, you hear those stories where they'd be the FBI would be like wiretapping the mob, and they'd be watching Sopranos going, how the fuck are they so realistic? I don't understand this at all. I don't think there's going to be this issue if any of those mobsters are watching NXT. Not going to be a problem.
I kind of enjoy it, but it's wrestle crap. It is what it is. Speaking of which, any thoughts on Brian Pillman Jr. Coming in the future?
Those people excited. Those people excited have never seen him wrestle. That's all I'll say. They've never seen him wrestle as well. I like the video. I like the idea of it. Just when you see him come out and wrestle, then it's going to be very, very different. But like, if he's not going to succeed here, he won't succeed anywhere. Like, he
He's not
really
going to
won't.
succeed here.
But he's also
I feel brave.
kind of, again, we speak about what NXT should be. It kind of
Yeah.
should be this. Like, it fits
It'd be a better home
perfectly
for him.
for this. It's a much better home than AEW.
I'm actually surprised, unless you've got more on NXT, just so quickly on Jade. They had a debut video or a hype video for her on Raw. So like they made clear like she's coming main roster. It was a lot of training in the performance center, and we've signed this new star. And ESPN says here's Jade Cargill, but like they gave her like the business on Raw. So she's not coming to NXT, and she shouldn't. I haven't watched it. I'm like, she should be in the performance center. She should absolutely be there every fucking day. But she's probably at this point too big a star. There's an alternate universe where maybe she'd have come through NXT and built her way up, or an AEW equivalent. How about that as an idea? But I think she's clearly they're going with her being a mainstream name, and she's doing mainstream numbers as well. They were the hyping how well her YouTube videos do, and yeah, they definitely do. So there we go. But yeah, anything more on here NXT in general before we move on?
I think I've said my thoughts.
Cool. Few minutes left. What else you been watching, JP? What else is going on?
One other thing that I did see this week, I think it's probably the only other thing I saw was the Stardom 5-star Grand Prix finally came to an end for this. And again, like last week, like I said, if you want to read like a proper kind of in-depth review of it and a review of how people did throughout the tournament, the great Karen Peterson has done that on Post Wrestling. It's like a brilliant review where she goes through like the kind of the block matches, which I didn't see, and it talks about how they did in the tournament. Actually, no, tell a lie. I did see Mariah May in what is going to be her final match, and I mean, she lost. It was the opener, and she lost to Hanan, who ended up crying at the end of it as well. And then she said some stuff in Japanese, and she said, "I love Stardom and I love you all." And it was like the best place for her to be. But again, she has the kind of like in terms of her look and her presentation, it's kind of perfect for the kind of US TV. So she might be turning up in AEW sooner rather than later there as well. The final was a bit of a surprise because there was a fair few injuries, like Utami Hai and Shishita. I think it was who was it? Saya Kamatani was favoured to kind of be going all of the way, and she got injured in like the opening rounds on there as well. And so they went with Suzu Suzuki versus Micah in the final, which Suzu Suzuki won in less than 15 minutes. And I've spoken about her before because she's one of these like young, prodigious wrestlers. It was interesting because the crowd wanted Micah to win because she's more of a crowd favorite there as well. So it was like a bit of a shock when I saw those two in the final. I was like, oh, okay. Because I kind of just skipped through for that. I was like, oh, okay, it's interesting that they're there. And she won. It was a good match. Are they going to be going all in? Are they going to be on their big show in December, challenging Tam Nakano for the what is it for the Stardom Championship? Assuming she beats Natsuko Tora. So that's going to be very, very interesting. It's kind of it's like I thought they would do this with say a Starlight Kid. It's like there's a whole other lot of people they could have gone for in Stardom, and they've gone with her, and she's been there for the least amount of time, and like, but she's clearly very good. It's just a bit of a risk, and it, attendance wise, I think it was down. It was like 2,500 for this. But like I say, there's a lot of the bigger stars. They went on it. Maya Iwatani wasn't featured like prominently on the card, so yeah, it was a bit of a weird one, really. So like as matches, I don't think you need to necessarily go out of your way. It's more keep an eye on what they do in the run up to their big show. If Mercedes is back, will they have another match with her as a kind of farewell? I don't know. They might do something like that. If she's back
it's
around
kind of
that
been
time,
quiet, hasn't it? With her being out, like you kind of forget that she had at least a couple of bookings still left on that mini deal, didn't she?
Yeah.
Oh well. Well, yeah, I've not been watching much myself actually, really, with so many hours of AEW to watch. Like I say, I watch Rampage and Collision, but does anyone care at this point?
Mate, we watched NXT. Surely that's enough for most people. Sure.
Again, Collision was good. Can I actually remember right now what even happened on it? Not really. Feels like it was 6 million years
Not
ago.
a clue.
I vaguely remember it being good. That's where we are. I'm tired. It's been 2 hours. Quickly before we go, a couple of quick news notes. Matt Riddle was obviously continuing to be Matt Riddle. Apparently, there's a video out there now of going back to what we were talking about last week, of him being drunk at the airport. For better or worse, Bix is on it. So yeah, there's plenty to you can catch up on with that if you do so choose. Couldn't happen to a nicer bloke. We also had some matches at the Fastlane. We'll be talking more of that in some form. Matty will absolutely be I'm sure giving us his takes on it on Fastlane. We'll have him on Spotlight next week and potentially some kind of tie-in with the weekend show this week once we settle that down, because I'm sure he's got lots to talk on John Cena teaming with LA Knight against the remnants of the Bloodline. I did see that angle. LA Knight continues to be extremely over. And yeah, last couple of quick news notes. Apparently, Sami Callihan is a free agent now. For those who haven't seen Sami Callihan in a while, get ready for a shock. That's what he looks like now. For video viewers, fucking hell. Speaking of Matt Riddle, I don't know if Sami Callihan, as much as I rated him a few years ago, is worth digging up some of the skeletons in his closet, but we'll see where he lands. And yeah, a couple of other related notes. Kijimoto talked about the possibility of Noah working with WWE. Sounds like old man talking shit to me, JP, which is kind of what your mate Muto does. He talks a lot of shit, and then we'll blame it on the mistranslations. So we'll see what happens there if anything comes to that. But I'll ask you any thoughts on that and any thoughts on the big free agent news, which is our good friend Katsuhiko Nakajima finishing up with Pro Wrestling. No Noah talk today, but a couple of Noah stories to wrap us up there. JP, do you see? Do you see him landing anywhere? Obviously, Tony Khan was amongst a very weird press that we didn't actually get a chance to talk about earlier, where wrestlers were doing kayfabe and then wrestlers were doing not kayfabe, which happens, but it's still a fucking weird thing to kind of watch, where like Edge is talking about his mate Jay, and then his mate Jay comes out and is completely in character as Christian. They probably need to pick a lane with that stuff. That's another conversation. When asked, Tony Khan did say he'd be interested in Nakajima, and yeah, he's got friends in Japan who've speculated WWE. New Japan is high in the speculation, and Tony Khan, when asked, was very interested too. Do you think it's happening?
AEW don't need him. Trust me, I'm wearing a fucking Congo shirt, which is a faction that exists no more, sadly, which kind of makes this t-shirt somewhat, well, either a collector's item or completely redundant, depending on your point of view. I think for him, he's always been like a kind of freelancer at heart, and he'll get some like kind of one-off paydays from promoters who love that type of wrestler, particularly in the States, to come over, even get him over to the UK if he can, but I imagine he'll come at quite a price. New Japan is the obvious place. He would light things up. If you remember the time when he was in New Japan, when he did that G1 and he had that pull-apart brawl with Shibata there as well. Now, given the fact he likes to do proper stiff slaps and the rest of it, I'd be putting him in the ring with Shibata anytime soon. But New Japan feels like the best landing spot to add something like a kind of a bit of a dark horse wild card mix, you know, to put into the frame. I think he would be in. I think he'd be a lot more interesting. And working New Japan, as we know, that won't prevent him from working the States. Probably turn up in fucking Impact, given the way that like it tends to go there. And I think you can get some value out of him. But unbelievably, simply because I'm assuming child labor laws are positively mocked in Japan. Even in wrestling since he was 15, even in fucking MMA since he was a child, which is scary at a time when MMA was completely fucking unregulated, I might add. This isn't like your kids doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu on a Saturday morning. This is a world away from that. Like he was doing that kind of stuff. But it feels to me like New Japan is where he'd have the most value, like particularly because of the character, the kind of worker he is, with an ability to then go and work overseas, do one-off matches in AEW if he does some stuff in New Japan that kind of catches the eye. If he went to AEW now, he'd be completely lost in the shuffle. WWE wouldn't look at him. They wouldn't have an interest. Like I just can't see why they would go for him. He doesn't have what they're looking for in particular. And unless you put him up in some sort of wacky gimmick, which is the last thing in the world I need to see from him. Because he's a shit kicker. You see him as a shit kicker with this kind of cheesy smile on his face, like the entire time. It's like that's the look. it would work in New Japan. He would add something to the mix, and they kind of need, specifically after the Dome, what I'm hoping is the end of LIJ law, that putting characters like that into the mix would make it a lot more of an interesting place.
Definitely. Well, he's a man who deserves better. Definitely.
Yes.
I think most you can say that on most of that
yes.
roster. And probably also the All Japan roster. But I mean, the obvious, we said that at the time when the news came out, everyone goes, oh, well, New Japan. And, you don't want to say that. It's a Japanese wrestler, therefore, New Japan. But he would add something fresh to it. Absolutely. It feels more realistic, but Tony Khan's not ruling out America. So, maybe he's a fan. Maybe he was like Gareth, watching all those matches a couple of years ago, and was a full-on Noah Sicko at one point. You never know. He might have been.
He could have been. He can have belting matches. That match with Miyahara, still speaking about like match of the year list. That one's definitely going to be in my match of the year list in there as well. So he can still go. Like I say, he's 35.
Match,
He's a good 13 years younger than Adam Copeland.
There you go.
13 years.
And 12 younger than Jerry, so that's it. But yeah, there you go. That's the other news stuff. So yeah, unless there's anything else from you, JP, I'll just reiterate what we said earlier. Obviously, it's a new month, so it's always a good time to potentially join us over on the Grapple Patreon. We'll always take you. It'd be great to have more on board. We are obviously launching this month. It is our first month ever of having YouTube memberships as an option as well. But yeah, if you want to have a gander on what's going on, the schedule is up there on our Twitter, on our YouTube page, and on our Patreon for all to see. You can join Patreon as a free member as well if you just want to see our announcements and know what we're up to. Even if you're every now and then we throw out a free show on the Patreon, so it might be worth your while signing up there to see what you might get. But yeah, pack month coming up in October. Horror upper mid carders on Film Club, spooky moments with Robert Brocky, Halloween Havoc patrons poll, observe this Dealer's Choice Redux Spotlight Weekend show. Time is back. Everything going on. Patreon.com/grapple, or like I say, as an alternative, youtube.com/@grapple. And yeah, you can go over and join our channel for the low price of $6.99 and get videos like this live every Monday and the weekend show on Friday and all that other stuff. So enough plugging, JP. That's everything going on. I think I've
that's absolutely everything. I would also say as well, there's a hell of a back catalogue now. Like we were talking about the Halloween Havoc 91 won't be in that poll because we've reviewed it before. If you want to go back to like the first flashback that we had done on there. Which is incredible for us. I know we were struggling to remember. Did we do a show on that? I'm sure we did. I've
had that moment a few times.
Most weeks.
Weeks. It's a Goldberg Raven. I feel like we've reviewed that match at some point. Oh yeah, we have. Probably more than once in some cases. Maybe more than twice in some other cases as well. So there you go. It's all in the back catalogue and all. The categorized for you as well. So yeah, check it out. And like I say, on the YouTube, all our videos go up there for members, pre-shows, Sean, everything we did last month on Dealer's Choice Month weekend show, live spotlight, and everything else. But yeah, on that note, thank you again, live patrons, for tuning in. Thank you, people watching on the YouTube replay. Thank you, audio listeners over on Spotify. And yeah, I guess with that said, all there is to say is we'll catch you next week for another spotlight.
Bye.
Good night, all.